IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Friday, November 29th. Yesterday was Thanksgiving. I'm sure all of you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope all of you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We're actually kind of celebrating Thanksgiving today, meal-wise anyway, because yesterday was we needed an emotional and physical day off after the week we had. So we decided to relax, get some stuff done around the house. And so we got the bird in the oven. So the Driscoll household smells really good right now. Got some football on over here. And of course, I'm joined by my guy, Trevor Trowbridge, who, Trev, it's football started yesterday. Big win for Memphis beating Tulane. There's some football on today. And of course, the biggest game of the weekend is the one, I think it's the one that's happening tomorrow in Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. It's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish against their true rival, the USC Trojans, also known as the Southern Cal Trojans. So it's here, Trev. I mean, this is the game we've been kind of looking towards for a while now. It's like, don't trip up with these other teams, and you got to get to that USC game with a chance to get into the playoff, and this is where we are. I feel like we're back in the day, the 70s and 80s, we're seeing 60s, 70s, and 80s, and the older fans will know this. It seemed like every year either USC or Notre Dame was playing for a championship going into that last weekend of the year when the Irish went out to California, and that is true again. Third time that's been true since 2010, Trev. 2012, Notre Dame went out to the Coliseum, and if you win, you clinch a spot in the BCS title game. 2018, you went out to the Coliseum undefeated with a chance to clinch a playoff berth if you can win that game. Irish were able to get both of them done. Very close competitive games. Third chance now. First time for Marcus Freeman to head out to the Coliseum. Man, I am so fired up for this game, Trev. I am ready to talk about it.
I'm ready, man. I love Notre Dame versus USC. It's my favorite rivalry. You guys know the first game that I ever sat down and watched from start to finish was 2005. Notre Dame versus USC. The old Bush push game. And since then, that's when I started to understand what a college football rivalry was all about. So before we hop into it today, Brian, you know what we got to talk about. We got to talk about our friends over at MyBookie, because there's no better way to watch rivalry weekend than with our friends over at MyBookie. So you guys know the drill. When you go and get signed up, make sure that you use promo code IRISH. What that's going to do is it's going to double your deposit bonus. So if you put in $10, they are going to give you $10 worth of bonus bets to help give you a little bit more fun, a little bit more action on rivalry weekend. You got Alabama, Auburn in the Iron Bowl. You have Michigan, Ohio State in the game. You have Notre Dame traveling out west to the Coliseum and with a playoff berth at stake. So
UT-A&M is back.
Yes. Texas A&M is back. So it's going to be an exciting weekend of football. Unfortunately, we are already past Thursday, but make sure you take advantage next weekend of MyBookie's risk-free Thursdays. I've gotten a couple questions about those, so that is found under the Bet Boosts tab. So make sure you go and check that out and sign up for that before every Thursday night football game. Also, be sure to enroll in their loyalty rewards program, where you can start earning extra cash just by placing down some bets. And of course, there's going to be a full slate of NFL games on Sunday. So be sure to check out our friends over at MyBookie, where you can bet anything, anytime, and anywhere.
Next weekend, gonna have championship game weekend. It's gonna be some playoff hopes still on the line. So a lot going on next weekend. Army Navy's the week after that. Man, there's so much good football left, Trevor. It feels like there's sort of an ending to the season, right? That's what the last weekend is. But man, it is really, especially now at the playoff format, it's just the beginning, really, of the huge part of the season. So today, Trev, we're going to talk about Notre Dame USC. We're going to do three different things, and I want to give you guys a heads up. So we are not going to do countdown to kickoff this week. I haven't talked to Trevor if he's going to be able to do this with us, but Vince and I decided, instead of doing countdown to kickoff, we're going to do IB game day tomorrow. So we're going to go live at 10 a.m. tomorrow. And we're going to recap today's games, and we'll recap a little bit the Memphis-Tulane game from last night, because that shook up the playoff ramifications. Boise State is like, woo, okay, we're good. We think we're good. Boise's in a position now, if they lose, they could still probably get in. If they lose, they're smacking Oregon State right now. But if they lose to UNLV next weekend, actually, no, they won't, because they won't. No, they'll be out. So I'm trying to think about this. The Big 12 is probably the biggest beneficiary. Actually, now that I think about it, it's the Big 12 that's thinking like, okay, our champ is going to have a great shot at getting in. because of Tulane getting beat. We'll break that down. We'll talk about the games from today. And then, of course, we'll preview all the big games tomorrow. So we'll talk about Notre Dame USC, but it'll be part of sort of a bigger picture look at the week, the game day week. And she heard me. She heard me talking about this with Vince yesterday. But it's going to be a lot of fun. And we've thought about maybe doing this sort of regularly on Saturdays. We're not sure but we're going to see how tomorrow goes, see what kind of audience we have, see what kind of, what kind of show it is and the engagement and all that type of stuff. So we'll see. Maybe we might continue. We might do this on championship weekend. We'll see. We'll see, Trev. We'll see what we're going to do. But so we're going to do something a little bit different this week. 10 a.m. Eastern is when we're going to go live. So we're going to, just sort of kind of have our game day, and we'll take it right up until noon, real close to noon, and then we'll kind of wrap things up so we can all go relax and watch the noon game. So we'll do that tomorrow. And so, and then of course, Trev, we're going to do today. We're going to talk about this game. We're going to talk keys to victory. We're going to talk about, obviously, we're going to do our predictions, and then Bill Bender and I we'll get Bill's thoughts on all the games tomorrow as well, which is going to be a lot of fun, man. But kick things off, Trev, obviously keys to victory. What does Notre Dame have to do to win this game? I think that when you look at USC, you see 6-5. You see they lost to Minnesota. They lost to Maryland. They've got some bad losses, but this is a team that has literally been in every single game they have played this year. This is a team, I saw a tweet yesterday, and I don't remember who it was from, but there have only been 5 teams in the country, including Notre Dame being one of them, who has led in the fourth quarter of every game they've played this year. Because remember, Notre Dame had a 14-13 lead on Northern Illinois late in that game. USC is one of those 5. They have led in the fourth quarter of every single game that they've played. All 5 of their losses have been by 7 points or less. They have a 7-point loss, a 5-point loss, a 3-point loss, and of course had the 1-point loss to Maryland, a game where they were leading, and then of course they had the loss to Michigan, as 3-point loss to Michigan as well. So this is a good football team. Right? Well, I should say this is a scrappy football team. I don't know if I'd say that they're good, because they've got to learn how to win before you can say that they're good. But they're a competitive football team. They have talent. They don't quit, right? That's the thing about this USC team. They don't quit. And some of the quitters that they have are gone, Barry Alexander being one. And I think they've been a better team since then because of his departure. So Notre Dame is going to have to play good football tomorrow. This is not a team that's just going to roll over and you're just going to out-athlete for 60 minutes the way they have some other teams they've played. You have to play good football to win this game. And when you talk about the keys to victory, we'll have offensive and defensive ones, Trev, but I think there's 3 that are sort of bigger picture that we wanted to hit on before it started. And the first one is the turnover battle is going to be huge. I mean, you part of the reason USC has won some close games that they probably should have blown out a team, and part of the reason they've lost some of the games they've lost is because they do not turn the ball. They turn the ball over too much. They have 3 games this season where they've turned it over 3 or more times. They're shockingly 1-2 in those games. And then the one game that they won, they were down 21-10 because of those turnovers and had to come back to win. They're not going to come back on Notre Dame the way they did Wisconsin. They can't afford to fall behind like that. 2 other games where they turned the ball over twice. They're 1-1 in those games. And we're, that Nebraska game was one that maybe could have been a little bit more convincing had they not turned the ball over. So you look at it, Trev, and in their wins, they have the 3 turnover game that they won, but they didn't turn it over at all against LSU. They only turned it over once against Utah State. They didn't turn it over at all against Rutgers. They didn't turn it over at all against UCLA. So they don't turn the ball over. They're hard to beat. At least that's how they've been so far this season. When they turn the ball over, some games that they win are a little bit more competitive. And then, of course, they're able to lose some games. So that's the big thing. And Notre Dame there is literally been no team in the country this year, not a one, that does a better job forcing turnovers than Notre Dame. Notre Dame right now, Trevor, ranks number 1 in the nation in turnovers gained with 26. They're 1 ahead of James Madison, Alabama, and Duke. So, you're talking about a team, and they do it like they're 3rd in fumble recoveries and they're 9th in interceptions. So they do it different ways. And so this is going to be a big part of the game on both sides of the ball, Trev. That's why we're talking about it now before that we get to the offensive defense, because it's going to be a big part of the game. If Notre Dame can get USC to turn the ball over, then they can win and win big. If USC protects the football, or Notre Dame can't force turnovers, or Notre Dame gets into forcing turnovers, then this game could be a lot closer than we hope that it will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Notre Dame is also in the top 2 in the country in turnover margin. as well, talking about both sides of the football. And Notre Dame's offense has done a really good job of not turning the ball over the last couple games, which is one of the reasons as to why they're able to blow these leads open so much. Another game where USC didn't turn the ball over at all was the last time Notre Dame played in the LA Memorial Coliseum. So USC, look, they're a team where obviously the record doesn't reflect how competitive that they can be. They do a really good job of keeping games ugly, if that makes sense, because they are such a gritty football team. They let Nebraska and UCLA move the ball up and down the field on them. They just couldn't finish in the red zone. Right. Nebraska only scored 20 points. UCLA only scored 13. But each team was able to move the ball up and down the field on them. They were just able to muddy some things up in the red zone.
That's the Danton Lynn effect right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that is, Trev.
Yeah.
Last year's defense, Alex Grinch defense, they're going down the field and they're punching those balls in the end zone.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And causing turnovers is going to be huge. I mean, Notre Dame forced 5 turnovers last year against USC, and it was a 28-point ball game. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame scored in all 3 phases. So turnovers are going to be huge. I know we're going to dive more into it once we break down the defense individually. I think they're going to be able to get Jaden Mavia in a couple of different ways, but turnovers are going to be huge. It's going to create a short field for your team. And Notre Dame's offense has done a really good job this year of taking advantage of when they do have a short football field to work with. So turnovers have to be top of mind. Have to be.
Well, you talk about that 2022 game, Trev, and Notre Dame had 3 turnovers in that game, 2 direct turnovers, and then they had a turnover on downs.
Yep.
The turnover at the end of the game obviously kept them from having a chance to win the game. They're down 31-21. They throw a pick. You score there, there's still 5-6 minutes left. You score there, it's a different ball game. But you think about the turnover on downs. You're down 10-0, and you've got a chance to move the field. They got that ridiculous 4th and 1 call, which I was like, okay, the tight end sneak is coming now. You had the jet sweep right to Logan Diggs on that. I just like the drive was just really frustrating. You had 2nd and 5. You run I think it was the jet sweep to Logan Diggs. Then Drew Pine tries to quarterback sneak it, I think, on 3rd and 2. And then they ran the Mitchell Evans thing, which they had already done multiple times. USC was prepared for it. They stopped them there. And then, fortunately, the defense was able to hold, but you had any chance of momentum, you couldn't get it. Your defense forces a punt. Offense finally goes down and scores a touchdown. Defense gives it right back up. You're down 17-7 at halftime. You come out the second half, and Notre Dame goes right down the field. Drew Pine hits Michael Mayer on back-to-back plays. They get down inside the 25-yard line. Drew Pine fumbles the ball. I mean, they were cooking on that drive, Trev. They were cooking. All of a sudden, you punch that sucker in the end zone. It's 17-14, and it's a brand-new ball game. And it wasn't even a forced turnover. It just dropped the ball, and USC picks it up. And then USC goes down and makes it 24-7. Notre Dame shows that they didn't quit. They score back. It's 24-14. USC goes up again, 31-24. Notre Dame scores again to make it 31-21. Defense forces a punt. Notre Dame gets the ball back with 6:03 left in the game, and 3 plays later, Drew Pine has Deion Colsey open in a cover 2 hole on the left. He's not one to throw it, looks around, throws over the middle, gets picked off. Basically, at that point in time, the ball game's over. But you go down the field and score there, it's a 3-point game with maybe 2-3 minutes left. You got a shot there of maybe making a defensive stop and going down and winning the game. USC goes 24 yards, punches it in, and the game's over, 38-21. And that's all she wrote at that point in time. So, and like you said, you couldn't make stops against USC that day by forcing turnovers yourself. So, like you said, Trev, it's a great example. You want to know how important turnovers are in a game like this? Go back and watch that game 2 years ago. It's a great example. Here's another one too, Trev, is field position. And I'm watching USC. I think it was 2 games late in the year. Like Penn State was 1 too, I think, where their punter pinned teams inside like the 2-yard line. And I think it was the Penn State game. Maybe it was the Nebraska UCLA or the UCLA game where literally it gets stopped like 3 inches outside the goal line. And that type of field position helped change the game. UCLA was able to make a big pass to kind of get out of it, but it put them behind a little bit, and they couldn't quite get to where they needed to get to kind of put some longer drives together. This is not an easy defense to go 98 yards on. And then, of course, Notre Dame's defenses might be the toughest in the country to go 98 yards on. You know what I mean? So, field positions is going to be huge. And that kind of ties into the third part of it, Trevor, which is when you talk about sort of just the big picture keys to victory is your special teams can't hurt you. This is the kind of game where a missed field goal, a muffed punt, shanked punt, things like that, where you give USC a short field can really hurt you. And on the flip side, if you play sound special teams, don't let Mekhi Lemon get any big kick returns. Don't let Zechariah Branch get any long punt returns. Make them go 75-plus yards every time they get the football. You're going to have a pretty good chance of keeping the points down. What you can't do is let USC get short drives. You can't let USC get short field touchdowns. That's what you absolutely cannot do in a game like this. You're going to have to force them to go up and down the field. They were able to do that in 2022. They had zero chance of doing that last year. You've got to be able to make that happen. And so field position is going to be a huge, huge part of this game, Trevor, and special teams is going to play a big role in that, positively, and you got to make sure it's not negatively. But that's going to be, man, that's such a huge part of this.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, special teams can't be a liability this game in either phase, whether it's the field goal kicking game, the extra point game, the kick coverage game, the punt coverage game. It needs to be a well-executed game from the special teams. Not saying that they have to go out and do things, miraculously. I'm not expecting another kick return for a touchdown like we saw last year. Would I be upset? No, I wouldn't be at all. I'm not expecting Mitch Jeter to go out there and bang a 53-yarder. Would I be upset? Absolutely not. Just do your job. Execute. Don't be the reason. Don't miss a 40-yard field goal and give USC the ball at the 35, right? It can't be something like that. So special teams is going to play a big part in winning the field position battle. And I like that you put that key in there, Brian, because I think that's also going to go towards the first point that you made, is causing turnovers. Give Notre Dame's offense a short field to work with. Make them be as efficient as possible. So field position game is going to be massive for them on Saturday.
Trev, let's jump into the offensive breakdown and look at the keys to victory for the Notre Dame offense. And when you start with this group, look, it's you guys know where we're going, right? Let's just get into it. And it's important. It's very important for this game, as it is every week. It's start fast. Mm-hmm. Got to start fast. And there's multiple. This is not a game where I necessarily think it's going to be you got to quiet the crowd down. I don't know. USC's attendance this year has honestly been kind of sad, to be honest with you, disappointing. The Nebraska game was pretty big, but a lot of that was Nebraska fans. You know what I mean? There's 63,000 for the Rutgers game. The Penn State crowd was kind of big, but it was, at least tickets wise, like some of these games, like they say that the tickets are X amount, and then you look at those, then you're like, that doesn't look like 75,000 people. But a lot of those times it's the opposing crowd. There's going to be a lot of Notre Dame fans there. But what you can't do is let the USC crowd that is there kind of really get into it and get too fired up for the game. But it's the start fast in this particular game has more to do with these two teams against each other. And as we said, this is not a USC team that if you jump out quick 14-0, they're just going to quit. That's just not who they are. They're not that kind of squad. But, when you look at their games this year, Trev, there haven't been a whole lot of games where they've really trailed a lot early. There haven't been a lot of games where they have fallen behind the way that Notre Dame has gotten people to fall behind. And I think that's been sort of a factor in part of their success this season, is that they haven't had to do that. You look at the LSU game, they scored first, and then, it was like back and forth the entire game. You look at the Michigan game, Michigan jumped out to a 14-0 lead. USC battled back, but in the end, they just didn't have enough because they were playing catch up the whole game. And Michigan obviously was able to win the game. They were able to get down. They were down 21-10 at halftime against Wisconsin and battled back. But that was the game where they scored first. It was kind of Wisconsin took it over a little bit in the second quarter. And then the Washington game, it was a game where they were down 20-7 at halftime and could just never quite get back into it until late. And then, of course, Washington goes right down the field and gets it back. Actually, that was a game where it was 27 at halftime, and then I think USC scored all the points in the third quarter, took the lead into the fourth quarter, and then they didn't score anything in the fourth quarter, which hurt them. But again, you exhaust a lot of energy trying to come back, and then that's why you're seeing teams kind of put you away in the fourth quarter, because you just have to exhaust so much energy into coming back. But Notre Dame's the kind of team where when they jump on you, they can jump on you and then bury you. And that's going to be the key in this game is you got to start fast. You've got to get some momentum going in this game. You've got to get your confidence going. You've got to shake off whatever travel rust that you've got going on. Because in a game like this, Trev, my fear is you start slow, they get confident, they find some things they like about you, and then it just starts slowly just kind of going downhill a little bit. So that's why I think getting some really early momentum, some really early excitement on this offense, putting the ball in the end zone, drive 1, drive 2, drive 3 is how you kind of put this team away. And then also, Trev, this isn't just about beating USC, right? Like the main goal on Saturday is just win the game. If you win the game, you're not only in, but you're hosting. That's just now it may be 6, maybe 8, but you're hosting. However, if you're talking about, okay, what's the ideal scenario for Notre Dame? A whooping of USC is ideal because that may be enough to vault them ahead of Penn State and kind of lock them in for maybe a 6 or a 5 to 7 seed. Most likely that 6 seed. I think 5 is going to require some other upsets tomorrow is just kind of what I think. But it puts them in a position where, 5 and 6, however, are more, realistic, especially that 6 seed becomes a lot more realistic. So a convincing win is huge, and you're going to need to start fast and just jump all over USC to make that happen. Make this team say, hey, look, you're going to have a tough time today. And you want to put a quarterback making only his 3rd Power 5 start and never having faced a defense like this. You want to put him behind the 8 ball where they got to drop back and throw the ball. And as we get into the keys to victory for the defense, your offense jumps on them and gets a lot of points early. It immediately takes away the top 2 or 3 things that USC wants to do to try to make this a football game. And this is where the offense can help out the defense in a big way, Trev.
Starting fast is going to be a massive key. It will put Notre Dame in the driver's seat to dictate the pace of the game. And when you have somebody on the other side of the ball, an offensive mind like Lincoln Riley, who has an arsenal of very athletic receivers at his disposal, you have to make sure that you're dictating the pace. Don't let USC get in any sort of rhythm. That's why I love starting fast in this game. You dictate the pace. You dictate the tempo. You control the noise. And if Notre Dame is able to start fast on offense and defense, that's really going to aid it. They started fast on offense and defense against Army, and we know how that game went. Now, USC is a different football team than Army. They're put together a little bit differently. But I think the same principle still applies. If you're able to start fast and remain fast, that's another key. Like, that's the only kind of next level that I'll add to starting fast. Is we've seen games where Notre Dame drives down the field and scores on their first possession. And then we don't really see anything for the next quarter to quarter and a half. So go out, start fast, remain fast, finish strong, and I like our odds on Saturday. I do.
Y'all know how fired up Trevor is for this game because he just said our odds. That means Trevor is in his this is a big one mode that he's feeling it right now.
Yeah.
Trev, I love it. Key number 2, you got to run the football. You got to establish a run game. I mean, this is such an important part to this game, Trevor, and it's for a couple reasons. Number one is it's like when to win games like this, you got to do well what you do well, right? And this is a team that runs the football. I've heard a lot of people say like, USC's got a good run defense, and I guess it depends on how you look at it. Their defense is better. Their run defense is better than it was last year. There's no doubt about that. Last year, USC gave up 186.5 rushing yards per game. They gave up over 200 yards, 6 times, including 316 to Washington, who's not a team known for running the football. They did held Notre Dame to 125 because they only had 29 carries because they had such short fields. But this year, they've only given up over 200 yards once, and that was all the way back on September 21st against Michigan. They haven't given up over 125 yards since back on October 5th. So in a lot of ways, Trevor, their run defense has certainly improved. They held LSU to 117, Utah State to 187, Wisconsin to 106, Penn State to 118, Maryland to 56, Rutgers to 121, Washington to 113, Nebraska to 119, and UCLA to 111. Having said that, I would say this. They have not faced a team like Notre Dame in a while, and they still gave up over 4 yards a carry to UCLA and Nebraska. The last 3 teams, 4 of the last 5 teams they've played have carried the ball less than 30 times in a game. They don't play a lot of really good rushing teams. And when you look at Notre Dame and you look at this USC defense and you talk about, well, who have they played so far? Here's what the ranks are for the teams that they've played when it comes to rushing offense. LSU ranks 109th in rushing. Utah State ranks 30th. They did shut down Utah State, Power 5 team. Michigan ranks, see here, they're way down here. They were better than 71st in rushing. Wisconsin ranks 65th. Penn State ranks 28th. They did a good job in that game. Maryland ranks 115th. Rutgers ranks 51st, although they do have a 1,000-yard running back. Washington ranks 86th. Nebraska ranks 100th, and UCLA ranks 130th. So that's going to factor into why you're holding some of these teams down. And when you look at USC's numbers, there's certainly a lot to like about it. And it's like, as I said, a huge credit to Danton Lynn for turning them around, because even some of those teams that didn't run the ball well would have ran the ball well on them last year. And so when you look at the overall numbers on the season, they rank 43rd in rushing yards per game. That's actually better than what Notre Dame is doing. Notre Dame is giving up 133.6. Again, this is why I say context matters, because Notre Dame has played Army, who they gave up 207 rushing yards to, which is like 130 less than what they normally get. They also played Navy, who's averaging 243 rushing yards a game on the season, and Notre Dame held them to gave them to 222, which is below their season average. So when you're playing teams that run the triple option, your numbers are going to be naturally higher in that regard. But Notre Dame has a run defense that's been good at time, but at times it can be vulnerable, and their numbers are very similar to USC. So it shows, just kind of where Notre Dame is when it comes to rush defense on the season, and compared to where USC is. And just for another quick comparison, Notre Dame's rush defense this season ranks 13th against FBS opponents, which is when you remove the two option teams. And USC's ranks 37th. So again, they're both quality rush defenses. But one big difference is when you get down to some of the other numbers, Trev, beyond just the yards per game. They rank 73rd in yards allowed per attempt. They rank 54th in touchdowns allowed, and they rank 79th in giving up 7 runs of 30 yards or more, and they only rank 119th in tackles for loss. Compare that to Notre Dame, who ranks 11th in yards per game, 3rd in yards per attempt, 3rd in rushing touchdowns, 5th in the country of runs of 30 yards or more with 14, and they rank 28th in fewest tackles for loss allowed. So when you look at those numbers, obviously this is a huge mismatch for Notre Dame, a huge advantage for Notre Dame, and USC has not played a team like this. But I also would contend that it's been probably since the Georgia Tech game that Notre Dame played a run defense like USC's from a talent standpoint. Now, USC's run defense to me is not better than Army's in regards to how it's carried out, how it's coached, how it's defended, and they ran well then. But Army doesn't have the athletes and the players that USC does. So I would say, since they've seen a run defense with this kind of talent, you have to go back to Georgia Tech. And in the last 5 games, Trevor, Notre Dame has ran for over 500. Last 6 games, Notre Dame has gone for 201 yards or more in 5 of those 6 games. 229 against Stanford, 265 against Navy, 201 against Florida State, 234 against Virginia, 273 against Army. The only team to hold them below that was all the way back against Georgia Tech, who held them to 168, and was also the last team to hold Notre Dame below 5 yards a carry. Actually, the last team to hold Notre Dame below 6 yards a carry was that Georgia Tech team. So it's going to be a battle. Notre Dame can run the ball on them. Doesn't mean that they will, but if they're going to win this game, they need to. Look, and I don't care if they come out in the first series and throw the ball a few times just to loosen USC up if they're like loading the box. That's fine. But over the course of this 60-minute game, you have to establish a ground attack. You have to be aggressive. You have to go after them. You have to be at your best at what is your best, Trev, and that is running the football. It's got to be a big game for Jeremiah Love. It's got to be a big game for Jadarian Price. And I won't be shocked if we see a little bit of Riley Leonard, some designed Riley Leonard runs sprinkled in there as well.
I've talked ad nauseum this season about how much of a rhythm-based offense Notre Dame's is, and a lot of that is held in the key of being able to run the football well. Marcus Freeman talks all the time about how their identity, they're a run-first football team. They're driven by the offensive and defensive line. And what Mike Denbrock's going to have to do a good job of doing is looking at it kind of through the lens that you just talked about, USC has a good run defense. Like statistically, like they have better athletes than what Army had. They also have not faced Jeremiah Love. They have not faced Shadarian Price. They haven't faced a mobile quarterback like Riley Leonard yet. Use that to your advantage. Now, obviously, there has to come to some level of balance. And over the past couple of games, Notre Dame's done a really good job of maintaining a balanced offense. Right? There's a lot of times that I go back and I look at the box score and they have 436 total yards, and it's literally almost 218 passing, 218 rushing, or some sort of formula in there. And that is going to be very much what I think they're going to have to be able to do tomorrow, because if you're able to run the ball well, that goes back to what we talked about in point number one, is dictating the pace of the game, starting fast. Starting fast doesn't always mean start ripping off 45-yard bombs on the second play of the game. Be able to run the football effectively. It's going to be able to set up play action well. And I think Notre Dame's offense is going to do really well if they're able to get that run game going, man. I mean, it's going to give the offensive line. You want to talk about something that's rhythm-based. Notre Dame's offensive line is rhythm-based. More times than not, when they were able to get a good push in the run game, the passing game, it's almost like that level of confidence for them starts to step up a little bit. And in games where they're able to run the football effectively, their pass protection steps up a little bit, opposed to in games where they're not able to. So, yeah, running the football well and establishing a solid ground game is going to be huge tomorrow.
Now, I love how you call it a mindset, Trev, and that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is for them in this game. Running the football is going to be a mindset, and it's going to bleed into everything else that they do. Mm-hmm. You're absolutely correct. Number 3 is, and I think this is important, Trev, this is getting Riley Leonard into a good early rhythm in this game. I think that's going to be huge. And there's a lot of different ways. One, you kind of talked about pass pro. That's a big one. UCLA or USC has not been a team that is like incredibly great at generating a lot of sacks on the season. They've only generated, let me go here. Let me pull up USC stats here real quick. So USC on the season, Trev has, actually I got my stacking up article right here. So USC's pass defense, they rank 99th in the country in sacks with 18. That's they've only generated 18 sacks in the season. However, 5 of those 18 and 5 of those 18 have come in the last 2 games, and 10 of those 18 have come in the last 4 games. So they've been much better down the stretch at getting after the quarterback than they were for much of this regular season. And part of that is, I think, a better understanding of D'Anton Lynn's system, timing of blitzes, things like that. You had some personnel that you were missing. You've had to get used to not having. When Eric Gentry went out, they had to kind of adapt and how they were going to handle be defensively. And if you look at how effective he was early in the season, this is a crazy stat, Trevor. Eric Gentry still leads them in tackles for loss at 6.5.
They do.
He only played 4 games. He got hurt against Wisconsin, and he didn't have a tackle for loss in that game. He had his first 6.5 were in the first 3 games. He was a major weapon for that defense. That when they lost him, it really forced them to have to figure some stuff out and adjust and adapt. And then obviously that kind of, I think, put them in some tough spots, and they had to adjust. And I think they're a better defense now as they've had to learn to adjust. They have some young players on the edge that are now more experienced and more effective. So, I think they're a more dangerous pass rushing team now than what their stats might otherwise dictate or show, because they've evolved. They've gotten better. I mean, if you look at parts of Notre Dame's defense back in September, you'd say, well, they're not very good at this. And then you say, well, yeah, they weren't then, but they are now. And I think that's something that's been important for this USC team, is that. So protecting Riley Leonard is going to be key number 1. You can't get into a rhythm if you don't protect the quarterback. I think, as we talked about earlier, maybe having him get in some running situations, which, to kind of get him to a rhythm. But then Mike Denbrock has to really be on top of his game to say, what did Riley do well this week? What's he feeling really good about? And when you put that script together, there's got to be some stuff in there that lets Riley get into an early rhythm. That doesn't mean a bunch of hitches. Sometimes that can mean some deep shots. It's just whatever you feel best as far as what he did in practice this week to say, look, he was feeling this, he was feeling that. Maybe a couple of screens helping him get some early completions, a couple RPOs, some things like that. And then I also think a little tempo early would be huge. This is not a super deep USC team, and they've played a lot of really hard-fought 60-minute physical football games last month. I think if you push the tempo a little bit, you might get them on their heels and wear them down a little bit on top of getting Riley Leonard into an early rhythm. Because if Riley comes into this game hot early, I don't think USC has much of a chance. I really don't. And that's going to be a big part of it, is really getting Riley Leonard rolling in this game.
Riley Leonard does the best job of getting into a rhythm when systematically Mike Denbrock calls plays that allow him to go be an athlete. Now, sometimes that is a designed run. Sometimes that is, taking a couple deep shots down the field, let him get in a rhythm, kind of see how the arm's feeling that day. To me, the best way that Riley Leonard has gotten in a rhythm all season is those RPO plays. He's been reading those really, really well. There's a couple times where linebackers stayed back, took away that slant route, and then Riley Leonard was just able to go make a play. And those games, to me, those types of plays are what I've seen him get into a rhythm more often. I'm not necessarily saying let him go out and play street ball for 4 quarters, but that is when Riley Leonard is at his best. So if they're able to basically, if Mike Denbrock is able to call the game in a way that allows Riley to play to his strengths, hey, man, go out and be an athlete. Just go out and dictate the pace of this game. Go play point guard, right? I think, to your point, USC is going to have a really hard time keeping up with this offense, especially with the defense that they're facing tomorrow.
And then the final point, Trev, is when you watch USC, and this is taken a little bit from what Penn State did, but also other games, Nebraska at times had some success with this. UCLA really had some success with this. Get creative with your tight end and running back pass game. This is a defense that doesn't handle levels very well. And Penn State exploited that. Notre Dame doesn't run a lot of levels, to be honest with you. They're more of a horizontal stretch type of offense, but you've got it in your system. Use it. I think if you can get creative with how you use your running backs in the pass game, how you use your safeties, that's going to help schematically. The other part of it too, Trevor, is just looking at it from a pure matchup standpoint. The reality is that USC, and I talked about this on Monday, because I haven't done a show with you since Monday, or actually at all this week, right? We
did the college football show.
As far as a Notre Dame USC preview.
Yeah. Nope. This is the first one this week.
So one thing that I pointed out was USC is not good when it comes to coverage from the linebacker or safety standpoint. Both that are 2 linebackers who are really good run defenders. And Easton Mascarenas, I'm drawing a blank on his Arnold, right? Who's a really good run defender, in my opinion, was an all Pac-12 guy last year. The other linebacker, Mason Cobb, who transferred over 2 years ago from Oklahoma State. You've got Achille Arnold, who transferred from UCLA, who I'm a big fan of, from Oregon State. And then Kamari Ramsey, who transferred in from UCLA. They're all really good run defenders. And I think their arrivals and their presence, especially the guys that are new this year, so Mascarenas, Arnold, Achille Arnold, and Kamari Ramsey are factors. And then, of course, Nate Clifton at D tackle is another factor there. Who's also a first-year transfer guy. Those guys all have played a big role in UCLA being an improved run defense. The problem is, Trev, they're not real good in coverage. They're not good in coverage at all. Opponents have completed, it's according to Pro Football Focus, opponents have completed 38 out of 40 attempts against Easton Mascarenas Arnold for 389 yards. And then the 2 passes that were not caught, however, were picks. He picked them off. So literally a ball thrown at him has not hit the ground all year. You look at Kamari Ramsey, he's given up 25 of 35 completions on the season. He's given up 2 touchdowns. Opponents are completing 25 out of 30 passes on Achille Arnold for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Mason Cobb has given up 18 out of 28 pass attempts this year for 150 yards. He also has 2 interceptions, right? So, again, you've got to be a little careful with those guys. But when you look at it, Trevor, it's like those guys, Zion Branch plays some at safety. He's given up 10 of 16. I mean, that's in 2 touchdowns. Teams have had a lot of success throwing the football at their linebackers and at their safeties when they get into the right type of situations. Anthony Beavers plays a lot. He's given up 9 of 9 attempts for 63 yards, right? So this is a matchup, and Kamari Arnold, or the 2 linebackers are 6 foot, although Ryan verified on the show on Monday that his official listing is closer to 5'11". Achille Arnold, Kamari Ramsey, they're all listed at 6 feet tall. Mason Cobb, 6 feet tall. You've got 6'6" tight ends, 6'7" tight ends. You've got 6'1" running backs. This is a game where it kind of ties into getting Riley Leonard going. If there's some creativity to how he uses his running backs and tight ends in the screen game and in the drop back pass game with ISOs, with clear outs, from different things. I mean, look, I'm not asking Mitchell Evans to do it what Tyler Warren did, right? I mean, that's a little nuts. He's not going to catch 17 passes for 224 yards, but you can have some success throwing to your running backs and your tight ends against this defense, Trev. There's no doubt about it, and that's something that I want to see Notre Dame do. I mean, you look at USC, and I mean the UCLA game. TJ Harden had 3 catches for 37 yards. They ran a tight end screen for a touchdown, and they don't throw to their running backs a whole lot. So I definitely think this is a type of game, Trev, where if you can be creative with how you use those players and they're very talented pass game weapons, you can take advantage big time of this USC defense, their lack of height, their lack of coverage ability up the middle at linebacker and at safety. That's my final big piece, where you could get some big time chunk plays in this game, and from both positions if you're creative enough with it.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to matchups, right? I know we talked at the beginning of the show about how Notre Dame can't just go out and out-athlete this team. That doesn't mean that from when you look at Notre Dame versus USC in a vacuum, that doesn't mean that they're at an equal level of athleticism. That just means you can't sacrifice being able to execute and just say, well, we just have better guys. It's an and, right? That's the way that I look at it. And Notre Dame has better athletes than what USC does in given matchups. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head, man. I mean, the glaring one is tight ends and running backs versus their linebackers and safeties. And if Notre Dame is able to take advantage of those and get their players into open space, get Jeremiah Love in space with the ball in his hands 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, good luck. And that's not a slight to USC. Do you know who's been able to bring him down in the open field? Not a single team that Notre Dame's been able that Notre Dame has faced this year. Not
Nobody.
A one.
Right.
Not a one. So use those to your advantage. And I think you said it perfectly, is you want to know the best way to get Riley Leonard in a rhythm. You have an arsenal of 3 tight ends, all 6'5" and above. Get those guys in a rhythm. Get them going. Get Jeremiah Love out in space. Hit Aeneas Williams on a flat route like you did against Georgia Tech to get you down into the red zone on 3rd down, right? So just make sure that you're taking advantage of those matchups and get them going. It's all going to be about rhythm for Notre Dame's offense on Saturday. And utilizing the running backs and the tight ends is going to be huge.
Trev, let's dive into the breakdown of the Notre Dame defense and the keys to victory for the Notre Dame defense in this game. And look, it really starts with it goes beyond shutting down the run game. When Notre Dame played USC 2 years ago, my number one key was you got to stop the run. And Al Golden went into that game and had a kind of a stop the pass game type of mentality. And USC did not have a great success throwing the ball on Notre Dame that year. Caleb Williams, that's in that game, went 18 of 22, but it was a lot of short throws, 232 yards. Couldn't really get the ball down the field. You had one busted coverage completion to Jordan Addison. But outside of that, they didn't really rip them up, but they ran all over Notre Dame because Notre Dame wasn't prepared to shut down the run. And when I look at this football team, especially now that Miller Moss is out of the lineup, the biggest concern I have is their ability to run the football. The issue for USC for most of the year has been a willingness to run the football, not an ability to run the football. And I just look, I've said this a million times. I don't think Lincoln Riley's the smartest people make him out to be as a head coach, but he's not an idiot. And when you look at this game, I just don't see how he thinks, hey, let's go out there and try to throw all over the number one pass defense in the country. I can't come to grips with the fact that he's that not smart. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to throw the football. It doesn't mean that at all. But when like last week they tried to throw the football. Well, UCLA has the number 111 pass defense in the country. The week before, Nebraska's ranks number 66. Of course, they're going to try to throw the ball in those teams. Notre Dame ranks number 1, and in a lot of different categories. And you've got still a relatively young quarterback back there. Notre Dame at times has had some vulnerabilities to the run game. But it goes beyond just that. That's part of this. But my key really comes down to you have to stop the running backs. And it's not just the run game. It starts with the run game. You've got to stop. You can't let USC run the football in this game. That's where they want to be. They want to shorten this game. Lincoln Riley has no illusions that this is where I'll give him credit. He has no illusions that this is a 40-plus point team this year. They're not that. He knows that they've got to – this is about putting drives together, extending, being patient, not trying to just hit a bunch of home runs. I'm sure he'll certainly dial up plays to hit big plays and all that, and we'll get to that. But when I watched them, especially early against Penn State, they were having a lot of success with their running backs, a lot of success, running the ball, throwing the ball. Woody Marks is their leading pass catcher on top of being a good running back. Quentin Joyner goes out and has a 75-yard run on basically a jet sweep against Penn State. Woody Marks makes a ton of big plays in that game, running and catching. And when you watch this USC offense, and this is what blows my mind that he hasn't done this more, when the running backs are the focal point of the offense, that's when they're dangerous. And in this game, they're going to have watched the Louisville game. They're going to have watched the Florida State game. They're going to have watched some of the games recently where Notre Dame allowed running backs to kind of have some success against them running and throwing. And I have to think that's going to be an early game plan for them, especially when you consider how much success they had against the Notre Dame defense 2 years ago. Now, this is a much different schematic defense with Al Golden. Al Golden back then, if you remember, ran a lot of odd fronts, and he didn't always trust his four-man front to be successful, if you remember that. This past 2 years especially, he's been much more, we're a four-down team no matter what, and they've been a lot better. So you've got to have a game plan to stop the backs from taking this game over. That's my biggest concern. If you shut them down, USC can't win this game, in my opinion. They may make some plays here and there in the pass game, and I expect them to do that. The quarterback will scramble a little bit, but they're not going to be able to put enough consistent drives together to win this game if the running backs don't have a big game, running and catching. That's the thing, is it's both with these backs. And, Woody Marks, Quentin Joyner, they're dynamic players, in my opinion. So key number one, and it is, to me, by far the biggest key, is you've got to shut down the running backs. You cannot let them take this game over as a duo. And that's the thing, is in the USC game or the Penn State game, Joyner didn't touch the ball a lot, but when he did, they were big plays. Caught a touchdown pass, had the 75-yard touchdown run. You can't let these two kids take the game over. That is without question, number one, all bolded, highlighted, numero uno key. You can't let their running backs take this game over. Stop them. USC is going to have a tough time scoring enough points to win this football game.
From that aspect, I look at it very similar to the 2022 football game. When you have in 2022, it was your mindset in the game can't be, well, we're just going to shut down Caleb Williams. When you have that good of a football player, they're going to get theirs. That's one thing that I do want to remind people of, is when another team has good players, they will get theirs too. Now, Notre Dame's defense has been dominant this year, and I do believe that they will show out again on Saturday, because they have yet to prove me wrong, and Notre Dame's defense right now is batting 11 for 11, if we're just being completely honest. And the way that I look at this game is very similar. You have a receiving core that has, Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane and Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson and all these guys. It's a very deep receiving room, and they're all very athletic and can make plays. But what you can't happen is if USC is able to establish any sort of consistency with their running back room. Same thing in 2022. Caleb Williams was going to get his. He was going to run around in the backfield and dance around and break out of sacks. And I was okay with letting that happen. The presumed Heisman winner at the time, letting that happen, as long as Notre Dame didn't allow a 200-yard day on the ground. And they did.
Which they did.
And they did, right? So I couldn't agree with you more. Stopping the running backs in both phases, in the running game and their playmaking ability out of the backfield. I mean, you said it best. Woody Marks is their leading receiver in terms of receptions. He has 47 on the season.
I think the next closest is 40.
Yeah.
It's not even like he's leading by one because somebody was missing a chunk of time. That's not it. It's by – no, I'm sorry. Zechariah Branch has 43, and he's got a lot of screen catches.
Yep.
Right? And then when you factor in Quentin Joyner, he has 11 for 76. So their two running backs between them, Trevor, have 58 catches on the season between their two running backs.
Yeah. Yeah. Credit to Lincoln Riley, because he does everything that he can to get the ball into the hands of his playmakers. That's something that he's done well historically as a coach. And as long as Notre Dame's able to keep them in check, like I said, I can live with a big play to Zachariah Branch if he breaks one loose, for 25 yards down the field. But it can't be one of those games where USC's running backs are getting 9, 10, 11 yards at a time. And that's just, it's not going to bode well for the defense. So I agree. Shutting down the running backs has to be top of mind.
Key number 2 is you've got to disrupt Jade Maeva. There's a lot of different ways this means. Obviously, the easy one is rushing the passer. Obviously, hey, look, get pressure on him. Okay, cool. We know that. Get pressure on him. If you can harass him and just get consistent pressure, it'll be the same thing that happened last year with Caleb Williams. He's going to make mistakes. Now, I actually don't think you're going to turn him over as much as you did Caleb Williams, because I think what he'll end up doing is just taking more sacks. If you're getting the same kind of pressure against him that you got against USC last year, you're just going to take more sacks. Now, I think this is a better pass blocking team now than it was at this time last year. They're bigger. They're longer. They're not a great pass blocking team now. They're better than they were in September. You can still have success against them, but you've got to be able to get some level of consistent pressure. But the other part of it, Trevor, as far as disrupting him, comes down to Al Golden, what he does schematically, and make him think he's seeing one thing pre-snap and then give him something different. That's been a big reason why. And Al Golden, Marcus Freeman talked about this in the preseason. He talked about how now that they're two seasons in, this defense wasn't going to be about year 3, wasn't going to be about adding a lot of stuff. Hey, now that we guys are 3 years into the system, we can add no, it was going to be, now we can start disguising things a lot more. So we're going to run what we run, but now we can show it differently. We can make people think we're doing this, and then out of that, we can do 5 or 6 different things. We're doing the same 5 or 6 different things every snap, but you never know what's coming because we can do all 5 or 6 things out of any look that we give you. And that's what he's done a great job of this past season. And that's got to continue in this game because, this is a kid who will kind of lock in on receivers. This is where I'm going with the football. And if you can give him some looks to make him lock in on the wrong route, you can then maybe jump some routes. People say, well, how does Notre Dame keep having these interceptions where quarterbacks just throw it right to a guy? Because pre-snap, they were showing one thing, and then all of a sudden, a Don Schuler comes underneath the route, and you're like, where did he come from? He was playing like single high before the snap. What's he doing in the field alley? Things like that. And those are aspects that have made this defense so effective. They think a guy's blitzing, and he doesn't. They think a guy's dropping into coverage, and he blitzes. I could see a couple Jordan Clark nickel fires that just don't get seen and just blow it up. Those are going to be big things where, looks like Christian Gray is going to be dropping into cover 3 or off man, and he's coming down at the snap. Things like that where you can really get this kid thinking where he's uncomfortable, because it doesn't even just include interceptions and that breakups, Trev, but it's also about he's going to be less willing to throw the football if he's not sure what's happening post-snap. And that's when your pressure can start to get to him and you can force him in completion. So I think disrupting him with your pressure and disrupting him with just him never being comfortable with the looks that he's getting coverage wise are there's 2 keys that are just above this. Number 1, shutting down the running backs, clear number 1. This is a clear number 2. Like for me, just no doubt about it. If you can disrupt this kid and slow down the running backs, this could be a rout. It really could. And then it limits some of the big weapons that they have if the kid's unwilling to throw the football. I mean, and UCLA did a decent job of that. That's why they had to pull out. I mean, the go-ahead game-winning touchdown drive required them to throw a backwards pass, throw the ball down the field because they were struggling to move the ball. And part of that was UCLA doing a nice job of giving him some stuff he wasn't expecting, and he made some mistakes with his reads, and he just wasn't comfortable throwing the football. That's why he started scrambling a little bit more because he wasn't sure where to go. And with all due respect to UCLA, they don't do it nearly like the way Notre Dame does. That's a big key to this game.
The only other thing that I'm going to add here, Brian, because everything that you said is spot on, and I couldn't agree with you more. The only thing that I'm going to add is when you do get a pass rush on Maeva, he is very careless with the football in the pocket. I use Joe Burrow almost as kind of like the teach tape on how to maneuver with the football when you're in the pocket. 2 hands on the ball every time. He maneuvers it away from active hands. Maeva is very out with it. I mean, he's running around. He's trying to do his best Patrick Mahomes impression. I mean, I'm telling you, if Notre Dame's defensive line or whoever is getting a pass rush on him can have active hands with the football, he will cough it up. He will. The one downside to what he does when he is able to scramble and break out of the pocket, to Brian's point, he locks onto receivers. And he will trust his guys, to his credit, to go up and make plays. And sometimes they can because they have some big-bodied receivers. They also haven't faced Notre Dame secondary before. So winning the turnover margin is going to be huge if you're able to get pressure on Jaden, because he is not going to be able to make the correct decision. But if you're a defensive lineman, if you're an edge rusher, have very, very, very active hands, because he will try to keep plays alive, and he's very careless with the football in the pocket. There was, between the Nebraska and the UCLA game, I mean, they could have had a combined 4 forced fumbles against him between those two games with how careless he was in the pocket. So if that's the case, that's the only other thing that I'll add to pressuring him.
Now, here's the key to that, Trev, is you have to make sure you've got good gap discipline, and you're not letting him just get into creases and run and beat you. The last two, Trev, are kind of quick. This one is just, it's kind of like last year. Notre Dame dominated USC up the middle, and they could do nothing. They couldn't run it. They couldn't pass it. A key, and this is more of a key to the first two keys, a key to shutting down the running backs, a key to disrupting the quarterback, is you've got to be dominant up the middle again, whether Howard Cross plays or not. That includes the linebackers, but obviously it's Riley Mills and Donovan Heinisch. USC game was probably Riley Mills' best game last year. I mean, Caleb Williams is still probably having nightmares about this big old monster from, this, country boy monster from Illinois, just all over him the entire game. Just these big paws in his face. I have like some great pictures that Angelo took of like Riley just like there, like about to harass poor Caleb Williams. That's key. Donovan Heinisch has been playing great football since Howard Cross went out. That's got to continue. You need Gabriel Rubio to really be stout up the middle, and you need your linebackers to play smart, gap sound, good defense. That's going to be a big key. And then the fourth one is this is a simple one too, Trev. It's limit big plays. And if they're going to make big plays, make them earn it. Make Deuce Robinson out jump you and outplay you for a football. It may happen. Make Kyle Ford do that. Make make Kyron Hudson do that, which he did. He had that phenomenal catch against LSU. Make them make those types of plays. Don't give up. They throw a backwards pass and you bite up and you let them get a cheap ball down the field. Don't misfit on a run gap and allow them to cut back for a 30-yard gain because you didn't do your job. Right? Do your job. Tackle well. Be disciplined and make them earn everything they get. This is not a high octane offense. It isn't. I mean, USC hasn't scored over 30 points in a game since Rutgers. And before that, it goes all the way back to October 12th against Penn State. And so this is a team that on the season has only been over 30 points or more 4 times all year, one of them against Utah State. But they can grind you out. They can grind you down if you're not disciplined. And then they can make enough big plays to hurt you. And you've got to limit those big plays where it's because they throw a screen to Zechariah Branch and you miss a tackle at the line of scrimmage and he runs for 25 yards. You just can't let that happen. Where you turn Deuce, like the big touchdown pass Deuce Robinson had against Nebraska. He came from backside. He ran a deep over route. Nebraska turned him loose. Can't allow that to happen. If Deuce is going to beat you for a touchdown, make him earn it. Make him outplay you for a ball. Make him, do something like that. Make them work for everything, because if they do that, I don't think this team has enough to win. So stop the running backs, disrupt the quarterback. The key to those two things is winning up the middle, and then finally limit big plays by tackling well and being disciplined. Make USC work. If they do that, I think it's going to be another big day for the Notre Dame defense.
The only other thing that I'm going to add there, Brian, is Notre Dame's defense has to come in with honestly, both sides of the football. Come in and do what you've done to every opponent post-September 7th all year. There's a common theme of Notre Dame opponents going into their next game and losing, and it's because they're banged up. I'm not saying go in with the mentality to go hurt people, not at all, but they're sore. Notre Dame is a very physical football team, and if there's one glaring thing that I saw last year when Notre Dame and USC played, is USC didn't want to compete with Notre Dame from a physical standpoint. Not at all, which I do think bleed into your two final points of tackle well, limit big plays, just come fast, come downhill, be aggressive, be assignment correct. Because USC hasn't played a defense like this yet. They haven't. And remind them what it's like to play this type of physical football team.
Which is honestly true every week. Nobody's played a defense like Notre Dame's.
No.
Except maybe teams that Ohio State has played.
Sure.
To me, those are the two very best defenses in the country. And I don't Texas has got some good numbers because they've beat up on some bad teams, but Ohio State and Ohio and Notre Dame from a week, and I think Notre Dame's is clearly better than Ohio State's, but just week to week is the top defense in the country. And when you look at the metrics, I believe Notre Dame is number one now. I believe in all of the different. I know that. Let me see here real quick. So let's go to rankings, football power index, resume, efficiencies. Let's go. So their defense right now ranks number 2 behind Texas on the ESPN football power index. And I believe that they're number 1 on the Fermo efficiency index on defense. So yes, they are. They're number 1. Texas is 2. Ohio State is 3. Texas got a very good defense. I just don't quite see it as much with them. The dominance, they've been effective, but I just don't see quite the same level of dominance. So that's obviously going to be a big one. So it's going to be those are going to be the keys. Trev, let's go on to our predictions, man. Y'all know the drill, right? We're going to give our score prediction, and then you're going to talk about how this game is going to be played out. Obviously, it's a huge, huge game for Notre Dame, Trev. We've talked about it this week. You guys talked about it, and I'm sure I know because I did the questions and got them prepped for you on the buy so holds. We talked about it on Tuesday night a little bit. I talked about it on Monday. We talked about it today. It's a huge game for Notre Dame. So now we've broken it down and we've talked about the matchups and the keys. How do you see this game playing out, Trev? So give me your score prediction and tell me how you see how the game will get to that point in your prediction.
Yeah, I have Notre Dame winning 34-10. So how I think the game is going to break down, I think that Notre Dame is going to jump out to a 10-0 early lead. And Notre Dame has played games before in the past where you get a 10-0 lead, and the opponents that you're playing just don't really have the capacity and the depth and the skill to come back on you. And I don't think they're going to take their foot off the gas by any means, but I think they will get a little bit complacent. I think USC is going to break off a big play and make it 10-7. I think Notre Dame goes into halftime with a 17-7 lead, and they have kind of that come to Jesus moment at halftime. And then the second half, they really shut it down. I do. That's how I have the final score being 34-10. I have Notre Dame's offense scoring 17 points in back-to-back halves, and I have Notre Dame's defense holding them to 3 in the second half.
So if the game goes how you think it's going to go, Trev, who gets your game ball from the Notre Dame offense?
On offense, for me, it's going to be Riley Leonard. These are the games where you rely on whoever's under center for you to make plays. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price have the capacity to have another big game. I like bringing up the tight ends in the run game. We didn't really talk about Notre Dame's receivers much today, but based on what USC secondary has done and is kind of made up with, I think Notre Dame's receivers could go out and make plays on these guys. And the key to all of that is Riley Leonard being able to play well in the run game and the pass game and making good decisions. So I think this will be one of the games where, again, I don't know if the stat sheet's going to necessarily reflect how dominant he was in this game, but I think it's going to be one of those where if you watch the game, number 13 was balling.
Defensively, who gets your game ball?
Xavier Watts. I think this is a game where Xavier Watts, I'm not going to say has a repeat of what he did last year because that's a pretty tall ask of any player, but this is Notre Dame's last regular season game. This is Xavier Watts' last regular season game in a Notre Dame uniform, as sad as that is to say. And I know he remembers what happens the last time he played at LA Memorial Coliseum. He is one of those guys that
he had a pick he should have made. You remember that? He jumped too early and didn't get up and get it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this is a game for me where I think Xavier Watts is all over the field. I think he's going to be a big factor in shutting down the running backs because I think he flies down. So I have Xavier Watts getting game ball on defense.
All right, Trevor. I'm going to give 2 predictions in this game. One's my official prediction.
Okay.
I went 27-13 because I think USC is going to come out fired up for this game, and I got to give a lot of credit as we're joined by my guy Bill Bender. I got to give a lot of credit to the job that D'Anton Lynn has done with that defense, and the fact that that's the reason they have yet to quit in a single game. That's the reason that they get down in games and they come back, or they kind of just right there with a lot of teams, because that's a scrappy defense. And I just feel like with the West Coast travel that I could see Notre Dame coming out and not starting fast. And it's just kind of a grinded out. You kind of mentioned like a 10-7, 13-7 game at halftime. USC gets a couple big plays that let them get that drive together. And then second half, it's Notre Dame goes up 17-7. USC kicks a field goal. Notre Dame kicks a field goal to make it 20-10. USC kicks a field goal to make it 20-13. It's just and then Notre Dame puts one on the board late to kind of put it away and end any doubt. That's how I see it playing out because of just how these games have played. I had something, Trev, in a breakdown that I did yesterday. This is kind of nuts. Like Notre Dame, you look at this rivalry. Notre Dame has since 1988 they beat USC by 17. From then until now, they've only had one other game where they beat USC by double digits. That was in 2000. The only times that Notre Dame has beat USC by more than 20 in LA was 1966 championship, 1953, 1949, 1947, and 1930. So you're going to notice something in a lot of those years that I just kind of brought up, Trev, and that is a lot of those years where Notre Dame won a national championship with like all-time great type of teams, right? I mean, 1966, that was Era's first title. And that defense gave up, I think, 38 points all year. 1953 was not a great year for Notre Dame. 1949, national championship, 10-0 team. That was the last of those great Leahy teams that won championships. 1947 was another undefeated season, was part of a 4-year unbeaten streak for Notre Dame. And then 1930, which happened to be Knute Rockne's last season and was also a national championship season for Notre Dame. They went 10-0 because Knute Rockne went 17-0 his last 2 years. So this isn't a place you go out and just beat them by 20 more points very often, right? Last time they beat them by more than 20 points was 1966, 12 years before I was born. So I just have a hard time predicting a blowout. However, if Notre Dame starts fast in this game and they establish a run game early, I do think this game could get out of hand really fast. I think it could be a 41-14 type of game. So if I'm wrong and Notre Dame does start fast, that's where I think USC just catches what everybody else has caught the last 2 months. I just think there's going to be enough sloppiness and hard play from both teams, and I think it's going to be more competitive than some people think. And that's where I got to my prediction. My offensive player of the game, I think it's going to be a Mitchell Evans day. I'm going Mitchell Evans on offense and defensively. Because Xavier Watts did what he did to them last year, they're going to avoid him, and that's going to be phenomenal news for Christian Gray. That is because I think he's going to have a big game, pick a pass off, maybe two, have some big stops against the perimeter screens, break up a ball or two. I think Christian Gray is going to have a big, big impact in this game. So I got my guy Bill Bender here. Bill, you and I are going to have a nice long preview of the big games from this weekend, but I wanted to give you a chance to kind of give your thoughts on this Notre Dame USC game and give your prediction as well on how you see this game playing out for the Irish.
Yeah, always looking forward to it. You know, the rivalry. The hard part about picking games on rivalry week, and I say this all the time, whether it's Ohio State, Michigan, like you were just talking about with USC, Notre Dame, the Egg Bowl tonight, Georgia Tech. You can't gauge the emotion end of it. You could say, hey, Georgia on paper should beat Georgia Tech by 3 touchdowns tonight, but you just don't know which Georgia Tech's team shows up. You know, Ohio State, Michigan, I'll be in the shoe tomorrow, and you know, you look at that 20.5-point line and you're like, how is that possible in this game with these teams? And you just don't know. So all of those things you factor in with Notre Dame on the road. You know, that's the big thing for me. Are they the better team? Yes. Could their running game dominate this game in defense? And Xavier Watts, who's being undervalued on some of these postseason player lists, not mine, but some other ones. You know, you got a fantastic player there. Jeremiah Love's emerging as a star. I think he's a difference maker in this game. 8.8 yards per carry in his last 4 games. I got Notre Dame 31-20. I think they cover. I don't think it's a full-fledged blowout. I do like this freshman quarterback for USC and the decision-making. One potential distraction for USC that's going to be a distraction until the Bears hire a coach is we're going to lazily link Caleb Williams to Lincoln Riley at all cost. He'll get asked that question tomorrow. No question. So I like Notre Dame, the focus. I think they win the game, punch their first-round home game ticket in the process. Pretty sure they'll get a first-round home game. And, you know, we'll get into it a little bit more here as we go. But, I mean, can't tell me they don't look like one of the top 5 best teams in the country.
Double-digit win, I think, cements that too, guys, because USC's 5 losses were by a combined 19 points. If Notre Dame beats them by 11 or more, you have 11, Bill. I have 14. Trev, you have 24. Right. Those are all of those cement Notre Dame as not only a playoff team, but a home team in the playoff. I think a win period cements that, but the more convincing the win, the better chance there is that they maybe leap Penn State. Cause I do think the committee is waiting to see how Notre Dame plays this game. How do they play this game? Is it kind of a really hard fought battle, just like Penn State had? If that's the case, then you're going to see Notre Dame and Penn State kind of stay where they are. If Notre Dame just comes out and just whoops you, even if it's only by 14, 17 points, where they're just clearly the better team, then that's where I think you can see them leap. So that's going to be that. You have any idea of, like you said, Jeremiah Love on offense, obviously Bill. So that's kind of what I would imagine the guy that you think will be the game ball recipient for Notre Dame if they come out and win this game. You think it'll be another Jeremiah Love game?
Yeah, I do. And I think they'll be able to run the football a little bit. UCLA had some success with that. Michigan obviously had success with that, with the big plays in the running game. And that's what doomed USC. I mean, defensively, you're looking at this secondary. Can they continue to make life miserable for opposing quarterbacks? When you size Notre Dame's defense up against the best in college football, this is probably one, Brian, it'd take you and me a half hour, and Trevor, like, I think Notre Dame, Texas, and Ohio State are all comparable on that side of the ball. And
we just talked about that.
Yeah. And which one's
more so? Yeah.
What's that?
So we were actually talked about that before you joined the show, and I said that I think Ohio State and Notre Dame are clearly better than Texas, and then that group is kind of clearly better than anybody else.
Right, and I like those two, and I think Texas is closer than we want to say, because I like Anthony Hill a lot, total game breaker at linebacker. Jahdae Barron, he'll be on a lot of those lists, and it was funny, if Michigan would have played Notre Dame this year, you could have had, okay, how did these teams all beat Michigan? Because Texas did that, and I think Ohio State will do something very similar tomorrow. And then if Notre Dame played Michigan, I would probably pick Notre Dame to win about 38-10, something like that. And like what they've been doing, they're just savage right now, the way that they're beating teams. The last 5 games, I challenge you to tell me somebody who's playing better collectively than Ohio State and Notre Dame, which is why, selfishly, I kind of want to see those two play down the road.
I'm laughing, Bill, because my prediction for Ohio State and Michigan for tomorrow is 34-10. So it's like very similar to what you have. And right. Like you said, I think they would be kind of the score would be somewhat comparable. Yeah, no, I agree. So, hey, that's going to do it for the Notre Dame section of the show. Trev, as always, phenomenal job, man. Great job on the Bison Hold on Wednesday. Thank you for knocking that out of the park. Really appreciate you guys. And Trev and I will be back tomorrow for sure for the post-game show. I'm going to try to talk to him into being part of our college game day tomorrow. We'll see. I'll have to give you a shout after the show, Trev, but appreciate you. Appreciate you, man. Good work as always. Folks, before Trev heads out, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And of course, if you've not done so, make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Bill Bender, how are you today, sir? Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
We did. Got to be around family a little bit. Played highlight was probably we had an Uno game at my sister's house, and they put a little bit of money on the table, and I will not share that picture at the end of the game with this thread, but I will send it to you separately because we all know who won the game against a bunch of 13 and youngers, and then took their money, which I did.
Hey, it's part of learning in life, man.
There was a couple mental mistakes by some of the 13-year-olds with the draw twos, but we had fun, and got to watch the Packers win, which was nice, and got to get ready for today. I know there's a couple games shooting off right now, so if I get a little distracted, I'm just keeping an eye on a couple games. But it looks like there's nothing to write home about right now. The shocker was Tulane last night. All these
and they controlled the game for 60 minutes. I mean, right. Memphis was the better team the entire game, which I said before the show, Bill, nobody was more excited about what happened last night than the Big 12. Because now the remote chance that the AAC winner jumps the Big 12 winner is now gone, in my opinion. Because I don't see Army jumping in and then doing enough to pass even a 3-loss Big 12 team at this point in time.
No, and I agree. I agree with that. And I think the Big 12 will get a bye week, and then you're going to look at probably, bearing the next half hour or so, Boise State and UNLV will probably play for a playoff berth.
I still think Boise gets that bye. I do.
Possibly.
Because of where I just have a hard, not that it shouldn't be the case. I just have a hard time seeing Arizona State just creeping up enough to pass all those teams and pass Boise State.
Which makes it, and that makes for a more interesting first round game when you consider probably Big Ten loser plays Arizona State or BYU or whoever comes out of the Big 12. That does make for a interesting first round game. No question.
It will. So, Bill, let's kind of dive into, we're going to do what we normally do. We'll kind of go through a set of games, then we'll do some upset games, and then talk about the big games. We already talked about Notre Dame, USC, so we'll talk South Carolina, Clemson, then Texas A&M. But we're going to kick things off, Bill, with the game that you're going to be at tomorrow, which is the game, as it is known around the country, and especially if you're from Ohio like Bill and I are. It's certainly known as that. So Michigan travels to Ohio State. Obviously, the Buckeyes have kind of been dominated in this rivalry in the last 3 years. Michigan has won 3 in a row, which ended a streak, I think, of 14 out of 15 years. Ohio State had won over Michigan. The only exception was being the Luke Fickell year, which was that kind of that bridge year between Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer. And a lot of those games, Michigan had a few close games against Ohio State, but there's a lot of whoopings in there, especially the last few years. And Ohio State, Michigan had that. It was just wild how it happened. You had the 2020 year where they canceled the game, and everybody knew that if they would have played Ohio State that year, it would have been a slaughter. Coming out of that year, Michigan was just a different program, and we can talk about different reasons why, but the reality is they were a more physical team. They were a well-coached team. We can talk about all the Connor Stein stuff or whatever. As we've said a million times, that is not why Aiden Hutchinson absolutely physically destroyed the Ohio State offensive line in 2022 or 2021. But the reality is Michigan has controlled this rivalry the last 3 years. So when you look at it, Bill, on paper, this game should be a blowout. But as you said, you just never know with rivalry games. So let's get into this game. Obviously, Ohio State is a big favorite in this game. Bill, they are I'm pulling up the spread here real quick. They are a 19-point favorite as of last night. Talk to me about how you see this game playing out, Bill. Does Michigan have any kind of chance of making this a game, or is this just going to be Ohio State making one final statement?
They have my attention after how they played against Northwestern. I mean, hanging 50 anytime you can do that suggests your offense is working on some level. The Buckeyes, I think we're going to watch a very similar game to Indiana if the Buckeyes can get violent at the end and tack on a couple more, they might. How I would beat Michigan here's two things. Here's what could happen and what should happen. Ohio State should run tempo and throw to their receivers on the outside. It doesn't look like Will Johnson's going to play. That's been a season-long thing. Michigan's secondary is different when he doesn't. I have a feeling, though, they're going to try to do the hey, we're tough thing and try to run at those defensive tackles, which could allow Michigan to hang around a little bit because I just don't know how you run the ball in these guys. Like, look at the last 2 weeks. They've been just dominant against the run, and I know that the competition is what it is, but that was against Indiana too. Davis Warren would have to play the game of his life. They can't turn the ball over more than twice. And Will Howard just needs to do what he's been doing. He has a 75% completion percentage the last 5 weeks. What did you say your prediction was?
34-10.
I had 31-14. So
we're close. And I could see, like you said, I could see Ohio State making this an even bigger blowout by piling some on at the end. I just feel like Ohio State's offense. Here's where I'm at, Bill, and you tell me if you do. The reason I don't have Ohio State's offense scoring more is because there's one matchup that with all the other issues that I think Michigan will win in this game, and that is their defensive line is going to be a problem for the Ohio State offensive line. And I think that's going to create enough run stops, maybe a turnover from Will Howard to where it's not going to be the complete route that it should be or could be, I should say. And that's if Ohio State's offensive line was playing better and was healthier, then I might have put another touchdown or two on this one because Ryan Day will try to run up the score for a host of reasons. But he certainly will. With that D line, I still think that D line is good enough to keep it from just being really bad in this game.
I do too. And now if you play the doomsday scenario and say, okay, what if Ohio State somehow loses this game? The psychological impact in Columbus would be off the charts. They would still go to the playoff, but there would be an empty feeling. They would fall to like 10, 9, something like that. Because you're not
hosting.
No, they would not. You would have Penn State probably going to the Big Ten championship game at that point. you would have Ohio State fans just actively wanting Ryan Day gone during a playoff run, which would be the first major like weirdness vibe of the season, because how do you play a playoff game when I don't think it's going to happen. I just don't. I don't think Michigan has the offense for it. I think this is the end of their honeymoon, so to speak, because I think even at 6-6 or 7-6 or whatever they end, there is that allure of hope with Bryce Underwood coming in, though I would caution that will take time.
And he's still an NBA throw too.
And that's another piece. Now, I do think Ohio State wins. It carries them into this Oregon game. Interested to see how they look, because you go straight into that. It's supposed to be cold up here, and like I always tell people, this will be the 10th one I cover. Somebody that grew up in this area, you never take it for granted, because I can say this on this show, and I don't care. Whenever I see Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame helmets coming out of the tunnel, those are the ones that mean more to me. Mm-hmm. When we were at Notre Dame last year, when Ohio State played Notre Dame in that game, there are very few games. I've done this long enough, Brian, where you're like very rarely like this on your seat at the end of a game, like trying to like put your nose on the glass of the press box. Last year's Notre Dame Ohio State game was like that. Michigan, Ohio State, really last year in 2016 were games like that. And you just like, when you hear your friends talk about the games, you're like, oh yeah, I was there. That was kind of cool. So you never take that for granted. You always be humble and enjoy it.
That's how I feel about the Notre Dame 2011 game against Michigan. It was, it sucked for Notre Dame. The outcome sucked for Notre Dame, but that was a phenomenal game to be a part of. That was the one where Jeremy Gallen caught the pass in the last minute and won the game. So, Bill, we're on the same page there. Even last week against Northwestern, they scored 50 points, but they only had 396 yards of offense. And they averaged a very paltry 5.6 yards per pass attempt. They ran on Northwestern for 201 yards. They're not going to run on Ohio State like that, I don't think. That would surprise me. So, and Ohio State has a lot to play for. I mean, I think Ohio State's got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and with this rivalry. So I don't think it's going to be overly competitive. I don't. Another big rivalry game that's huge, Bill, which I don't know that I would have thought about. I would have thought there were I would have thought there's a chance for championship game implications for the Arizona State at Arizona game coming into the season, but it would have thought, is this a game where Arizona has a chance to clinch a playoff berth? And there's a lot of talk about Curt Cignetti and Coach of the Year and all that type of stuff. And I'm totally fine with Curt Cignetti winning Coach of the Year. But Kenny Dillingham, especially if they win this game, needs to start getting a lot more attention for the absolute phenomenal job he did this season, Bill, at Arizona State, because they were a bad football team last year. Not just record-wise. They were a bad football team last year. They went 3-9, only scored 17.8 points per game and gave up 31.8 points per game. Their last three losses were by 52, 36, and 36. They were not competitive games. And they even lost to Colorado at home. They lost to Fresno State at home by 29. Now you look at them this year, they're not just 9-2, but they've got some very good wins under their belt as well, including back-to-back games over a really good Kansas State team on the road by 10. And then the game ended up being closer than the way it played out, Bill. Arizona State was the better team against BYU last week from start to finish. They kind of let them back in that game. He's done a phenomenal job, but here's another rivalry game where it's one of those – you kind of have to – it's a cliche that sometimes annoys me, but it's true. You kind of have to throw the record out the window when you're talking about games like this.
Yeah, and Arizona was supposed to be that team that Arizona State is. They were the hottest team. It's funny. They've role reversed. Arizona was that team last year at the end of the year, throwing it around. They've got a couple outstanding receivers in this game for the NFL people out there. Tetro McMillan has been great. I don't know if the Blitnikoff finalist came out yet. He'll be close if he's not one. And, Jordan Tyson has been really good for Arizona State. They haven't run the ball as well the last 3 weeks, around 3.5 yards per carry or less in their last 3 games. So Jordan Tyson, 301 yards, 2 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. He's a big-time receiver. And, there'll be big-time plays, big-time swings in this game. And who handles the swings better? But, as we look, and we did that Big 12 chaos scenario, all that stuff, and that's starting to bear itself out the opposite way. Colorado's winning right now as we speak. I think Arizona State will win. I think you'll end up with the Sun Devils in the Big 12 championship game. It's just a matter of who they'll be playing against. I went 38-27 in this one, 38-23. Okay. I got the Sun Devils winning comfortably with the understanding that, some of that rivalry stuff could get in the way.
Yeah, Bill, I'm with you. I don't think this game is going to be overly competitive, to be completely honest with you, unless, like you said, it's some of that rivalry stuff, because I just think this Arizona State team is hot. And I just think this is a team that plays with, they just play as a team, and they've had some ugly wins. I mean, beat UCF by 4, but they battle, man. And I remember watching them against Texas State saying, boy, you know what? This is a team that's got some dudes now. They just got to clean up some stuff on defense. And that's really the key right there, is their defense is still the issue for them, because they just don't have the horses. I mean, if just being honest with you, they don't have the horses. I just think Arizona's offense has been really struggling. They haven't scored 30 points in a game since the opener against New Mexico. I don't think they have what it takes to really move the ball enough to win this game. So I think it's going to be a big one. I think you're going to see Scadaboo be effective in this game. I think he's going to run all over Arizona. And then I think they're going to hit some big plays. Jordan Tyson, who has, I think it's like 600 yards, over in the last 5 games. I mean, he's been hot. He's been very hot for them. And this is an Arizona team that gave up 308 yards to UCF, 200 yards to West Virginia, 200 yards to K-State, 200 yards to New Mexico. This is going to be a rout for them, in my opinion. So I think Arizona State locks up a Pac-12 title berth, and Kenny Dillingham should also lock up the Pac-12 coaches. And there's been a couple of Pac-12 coaches that have done a great job this year. Deion Sanders turning that team into a 9-3 team, yes. Phenomenal job. And if it wasn't for the job Kenny Dillingham is doing, he would be my coach of the year in that league as well. But there have been some really good coaching jobs. Matt Campbell's done a really, really good coaching job with Iowa State this season, getting them back on track. But I think Dillingham's the best. Purdue and Indiana, Bill, we'll just be kind of quick on this one. Does Indiana avoid an Ohio State hangover, blast Purdue the way they need to, which I think would then lock them up for a playoff berth?
So Purdue, we'll keep this brief. Purdue has been outscored by Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and Notre Dame by a combined score of 195-17. So I think one more coming.
You think it's more like that and not like the Illinois game? You think
may take them a quarter to recenter after. Anytime you play Ohio State or Michigan in that conference, it always takes you watch, or even Penn State, and you're that school. It might take a quarter. Oh man, we got physically beat up last week, and you can't measure that. But I think Indiana comes out of this one hammer time. They haven't, one of the things Cignetti brought up in the press conference last week, mentioned it twice, and Rourke did too, that, hey, we haven't beat Purdue since 19. And that slips up on you. This is how far this program's come in 1 year, is they've gone from not beating Purdue to, I think the question after this game did Indiana win by a bunch of points? I think it is Ryan Walters still have a job?
Yeah.
That's one of the Power 4 openings that's hot.
Bill, look, 1-11 is bad, but 1-11 where your team just doesn't compete
at all.
I shouldn't say they're not competitive, because I actually think they compete. That's the thing, is I watched the Oregon game, and they were playing hard in the fourth quarter. They were playing hard in the fourth quarter against Notre Dame. They're playing hard. They're just awful. They're not competitive. I watched the Michigan State game. They battled their butts down 24-3, and they battled their butts off. They're just bad.
Right.
And they're poorly coached. And he's made some really bad decisions with this football team. And losing Nick Scourton, or however you pronounce his name, it should not be enough for your defense to go from what it was last year to this year. They're a awful, awful football team. And I just don't see how you can justify another year of that. Now, the only question would be, can they afford to buy out and all that type of stuff? But he's going to be in trouble if they get blown out again. Because to your point, Bill, they're
not competitive.
No.
At all. Well,
Northwestern, terrible.
Yeah, right.
They're terrible. They got blown out by Oregon State, who's mediocre. They got blown out by Nebraska at home. It's just they've had the one fluky game against Illinois, and outside of that, Bill, they have the only other game that's been even remotely competitive is at Michigan State, who's not that good, and Northwestern, who's bad, in my opinion. So he could be in trouble.
So that's blowout. I think I don't even know how bad I made it. 40-10.
I can see that.
Maybe worse.
Because he's going to run it, because he's got to make a statement, right?
Indiana's got to say, hey, we are above the chaos. We are a 10. Like, here's what I said about Indiana last week to Trocchi, and I think I said it on our other podcast. I said, Indiana showed me the differentiation between playoff team and national championship team.
Yes.
And I don't think anybody who watched Ohio State thinks they're in the same competitive zip code. You can say, well, they dropped the punt. Well, yeah, they did, but they also had -3 yards on 17 plays after the opening drive, where
their offense could do nothing on Ohio State after that opening drive.
So it's hard for me to pick, but they're a playoff team. That's fine. In a 12-team format, yeah, we can say that. So I think they prove that. They go out, they take care of business, they win big.
Because the SEC's whole, well, our schedule's tougher nonsense gets eliminated and dismissed, in my opinion. It should be by the committee when you look at the fact that you can't say they're beating each other up, because it's not Georgia beating this team and this team beating. It's Ole Miss has lost to 3 unranked teams. Alabama's lost to 2 6-5 teams, right? Like those two, they're getting beat by teams that aren't good. That's the difference. And Indiana has played comparable teams to those, and they've beat those teams, right? So that's kind of where I get tired of that whole argument. That's why I look at Georgia differently than I do Alabama, even if they lose, to Texas but they lost to 3 really good teams, where Bama got smacked by a very average Oklahoma team, got outplayed for 60 minutes by a very average Vanderbilt team who lost to Georgia State like 3 weeks before that. That's the difference. So speaking of that, Bill, does the Big Ten avoid the SEC November drama this weekend with Washington at Oregon? This is the thing that could get really interesting. To me, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana are all locks for the playoff if they all win this weekend, especially if they win convincingly, Indiana being the only question mark. Buckeyes are in if they lose a Big Ten title game, if they beat Michigan. Oregon's in if they lose to Ohio State, if they beat Michigan. They still host, in my opinion. If they go 12-0 and then lose to Ohio State, they're still hosting. I think the loser of that game is the 5 seed. That's my opinion. I think Penn State is in. If they win, the only question is where they seated. And then, of course, Indiana we just talked about. The drama could be is if there's a crazy upset this weekend. We talked about Michigan, Ohio State. Don't think that one's there. Oregon hosts Washington. Now, Washington has really been a very good home team this year, Bill. They have not, however, been a very good road team this season. This is a little bit of a different animal because they had to go out to play Rutgers, which is across the country. They had to go all the way out to play Iowa, Indiana, Penn State. This one's a more of a traditional game. This is going to be a West Coast game. Oregon has also been a team that has had a couple clunkers this season, Bill, where they won, but they won ugly. And I don't think Oregon has really played all that well in their last 2 games. Yes, they beat Maryland 39-18. I don't think they played great. And they played really not good this past weekend 2 weeks ago against Wisconsin. So can Oregon help the Big Ten avoid the SEC November drama of teams getting beat by mediocre teams? Washington's the same type of team that just beat Bama. It's the same type of team that just beat, actually, maybe even a better team than the one that just beat Ole Miss. So can Oregon get that done and say, hey, we're going to avoid all that mess and lock up that 4th spot? Or, Bill, do we see a little bit of chaos finally come to the Big Ten, which has largely avoided that, if we're being honest about this one?
No, but to your point, yeah, I think this game might be closer than we think. Washington, there's a little, they know each other well. Dan Lanning hasn't beat Washington yet. Yes, this is a completely different Washington team than the one he saw the last 2 years. I'm aware of that. I think Oregon, that bye week came just at the right time for them, though. You reset yourself after you have that tight win at Wisconsin. Get the running game going with Jordan James. They've had a lot of 38-17 type games, 35-17, where are they really that good? And I do think they need to get themselves in a spot where they're ready for what's coming next week, because most people are going to pick Ohio State to beat Oregon.
Yep.
If it comes to that, if the scenario comes to what we think it's going to be, they will pick the Ducks to win that game. So I like Oregon here, I think I put 34-17.
I'm
think
31-20.
Yeah,
Prediction.
competitive though. I mean,
for a half, at least a half.
Washington moved the ball a little bit. They just have trouble. They've had trouble in the red zone. They have had trouble on the road, but this isn't that road game, right? Yeah. This is, if it were in Husky Stadium, I might feel a lot different that this could be like a one score, like nail biter type rivalry game. But I think the Ducks cruise. I think Dylan Gabriel has a nice game, and they continue to roll.
Do you know that Washington has not won a single game away from their home stadium this year? Even the neutral site game against Washington State, they lost. I think a part of that is Jed Fish's reluctance to actually commit to being more of a running football team. He's got a really good running back. He just won't commit to running the ball the way they need to. That's going to continue this week. And I do think, like you said, it'll be halftime. Maybe Oregon puts one on late in the first half that starts making the distance. But at least for a couple quarters, I do expect it to be a competitive football game. So you and I think that the Big Ten is going to avoid that drama. So basically, the top teams did beat each other up. Oregon's only loss would be to Ohio State. If that happens, Ohio State's only loss or losses would be to Oregon. Penn State's only losses to Ohio State. Indiana's only losses to Ohio State. So you think, by and large, we're not going to talk about Penn State, but you think the Big Ten avoids all that. Penn State beats Maryland, and they kind of cruise into the.
I think they get their 4. They get their 4, and really the only piece of drama to me, I think Penn State's going to do their thing. They'll get a home game. Indiana does their thing, gets a road game. Oregon does their thing, and pretty much locks either 1 seed or 5 seed.
Agree.
So they're either 1 seed or 5 seed. And then the only piece of drama for me, honestly, is Ohio State. And same thing. If they win, it's 1 seed, 5 seed.
As the only thing that could change either one of those, and especially for Ohio State, is if it's a blowout.
Right.
And I don't mean 17 points. I mean like 20 plus, you got destroyed type of blowout. Right.
Now, if Michigan beats Ohio State, and we hinted at it earlier, that they'll still get in, but like the logic traps on the radio here in Columbus will be hilarious because it'll be like, should we even go to the playoff? We lost to Michigan, that kind of thing. Yeah. Yes, this is the new world we live in where you can lose. I always go back, like I don't want to get too far down this road, but one year Green Bay got just hammered by the Bears, hammered in the regular season, and they ended up going to the NFC Championship game. It's that NFL mindset that in some ways you have to adopt. And I want to see, another example, Texas did lose to Oklahoma and made the playoff last year. Mm-hmm. It can happen in this new world.
Here's what gets crazy. If Ohio State gets upset by Michigan, again, don't think it's going to happen, but let's just say it does. It's now Penn State versus Oregon in the Big Ten title game. Mm-hmm. I think Oregon would smack Penn State.
Probably.
That is what could hurt Penn State because now you could be a scenario where they could potentially lose a home game. If at best, I think in that scenario, they would fall to an 8 and host an 8. And it would really create a very unique, holy crap, we were better off if Ohio State would have beat Michigan type of scenario for Penn State. Because if they finish 11-1 and then they're going to host, it's just, are they a 5, 6 seed or 7 seed or whatever? If they had to play Penn State or Oregon, I think they'd get rolled by Oregon. And then all of a sudden, how far down do they drop? Especially if Notre Dame whips USC. So that is the chaos that could happen. Is if Michigan did, that would set off a little bit of a domino, in my opinion. But we neither of us think that's going to happen. All right, Bill, so let's get into the next section before we get into our final 2 big games. And we'll just kind of quickly work through these. Upset alert. I got 3 games on my radar, Bill. I'm going to bring those games up to you, and you tell me if you think this – give me your prediction, but tell me if you think this game could be an upset. The chaos in the SEC. It's just been insane. Do we get another huge, momentous SEC shakeup this weekend when Tennessee plays Vanderbilt on the road? Big, not as discussed rivalry game because Vanderbilt's been terrible for a lot of years, but this is the first time this game has mattered in a very long time. Bill, does Tennessee avoid the upset to that 6-5, that brutal 6-5 upset that plagued Ole Miss and Alabama in past years, and plagued Tennessee earlier in the year because they're a different team away from home than they are?
You might want to have on Troche if you think the Vanderbilt thing is going to happen. So bring on Bill, our Vanderbilt grad, my partner. Great editor, by the way.
I don't think it's going to happen. I'm just saying these are the things that kind of lead into it.
Yeah, Diego Pavia, 52.8% completion percentage against the last 2 weeks. And Tennessee's better on defense, and they run the ball. The Vols are going to get in. They're going to win here. They're going to get in. It's only placement where they're at. I just like their defense better. And I think they are aware of the trappings of the Vanderbilt thing. Like they've watched Alabama. They've watched Texas go in there. Maybe Vanderbilt. I like Vanderbilt doesn't turn the ball over. Of these 3 games, I'm going to say least likely to have an upset out of this one, out of the 3 you're giving me. If I was ranking them 1, 2, 3, I would put this one third most likely.
Would you say it's more or less likely than Oklahoma beating Bama and Florida? Like, where would you rank it with the 2 from last week?
Well, I had no idea.
Where you were going into last week. Like, thinking about where your head was when we were doing this show on Thursday, where would you have ranked that one there?
Probably still third, because I'll justify it this way, because I went and I was explaining this. The SEC can sell this to me, and I almost buy it as like Oklahoma's 28-5 in Norman since 2020. It can be a tough place to play if you haven't played there. That's how I would sell it as the SEC. Not saying what Alabama did was forgivable. It was brutal. It was horrible. Florida, when the swamp's, it's a tough place to play.
Well, and especially since they already lost by 10 to Tennessee at home, and South Carolina blew them out at home.
Yeah.
Like that's where you 25 and whatever, but yeah, a couple of those blowouts happened.
They rolled in there. Now, Florida, when the swamps, they're playing with some momentum. Yeah. I give that.
And Florida's been, except for Texas, without Lagway, Florida's been to play Georgia tough. They played Tennessee tough, took them. I mean, the only team that really blow them out when they were somewhat healthy was Miami early in the year. Mm-hmm. Which, helps the ACC out a little bit.
And then what's the other one? Shoot.
Let's
go ahead.
Let's roll into these next couple real quick. Let's go Miami, Syracuse. Syracuse is a very unappreciated, sneaky 8-3 football team that has a road win over a current top 25 team, and they are a disastrous home win to Stanford away from having a very interesting conversation about where they could rank this year. Bill, 8-3, great job in year 1 by Fran Brown. If you're Syracuse, you're like, crap, he's been a little bit too good with some of these jobs coming open in the SEC and down south. But this is a sneaky bit of a trap game for me with Miami, number 6. Pass defense is the big shaky part of their defense. Syracuse is a team that can throw the ball around. Syracuse has got some big wins this year, but they also have a lot of their wins have been very close as well. 7 points, 8 points, 7 points, 7 points, 3 points are their last several wins since a blowout win over Holy Cross, and then they beat Georgia Tech by 3. So does Syracuse have a shot to pull this upset, Bill, or is Miami going to be focused knowing what's in front of them with not just the ACC championship, but also college football playoff berth? Because I think Miami locks up a playoff berth if they win this weekend.
Yeah, and it's, which McCord shows up, right? Like, he has 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions at home. He's much better at home inside. He's put up some games, and if we were doing 1, 2, 3, this would be my second pick. I think, just Carrier Dome. There's always a weird game there. I do think Miami will be happily engaged in a shootout because we can do that. We can throw it around too. We actually do that every week anyway. So this isn't going to be like we will go ahead and give up 30 points and score 50 points and people will pick at us, but we still have Cam Ward. And I still think that Cam Ward, of the 12 quarterbacks that will be in the college football playoff, I think he's the one that can change a game. Mm-hmm. I don't know that the other guys can't. When I say change a game, I'm not saying Riley Leonard can't or Will Howard can't, but just not like this dude. He can make so many plays. He could change it for better or worse, by the way. He could throw a terrible interception, but he has some natural ability, and I love his game and love what he's done for Miami. I do think they win a shootout, but it's not comfortable.
Yeah. I do think Miami wins, but I don't think it's going to be easy. I don't, and I think it's going to be a preview of what we're going to see next weekend in the ACC championship game, because that's another game that's going to involve a lot of points. Although SMU's got a much better defense than Syracuse, But I do you agree with me that as long as they don't get just destroyed by SMU next week, that if Miami wins this Saturday, they've clinched a spot? They're not necessarily home game, but they are at least going to still be
probably going to get an at-large, right? And I think so. That's bad news for the ACC or the SEC team trying to squeeze in, but I do think so. And I think SMU, if they win, we don't have Cal on our list. I think Cal can give them some.
I thought about putting that on here. Too,
we can just tie it together and say SMU, Miami both win. Probably play a highly entertaining ACC championship game. I'll watch it.
And SEC teams are going to be rooting for Miami to win that game. They've got a better shot at jumping ahead of a 2-loss SMU team than they do a 2-loss Miami team who went on the road in the swamp and blew out Florida back in September.
Right. And then, of course, here, and I know we're going to talk about Clemson here in a minute, but I do have to flesh out this one. Clemson loses to South Carolina. Kyle McCord has his redemption game because last year I've wrote a lot about Kyle McCord. We're one drive away from like a complete alternate history with Kyle McCord had he taken Ohio State down the field and scored. Kyle McCord beats Miami. Clemson loses, but they back into the ACC championship game. Turn around, beat SMU, and Dabo Swinney, who a week ago called the playoff the Big Ten SEC Invitational, can get it out without laughing, suddenly hosts a playoff game.
Yeah.
With losses to 2 SEC schools. And then we're going to be like, what are we doing in this format? And it is entirely possible. That is my favorite chaos scenario of the weekend, quite honestly. Clemson losing, backing into an ACC championship game against SMU, where quite frankly, they'd probably be favored or close. It'd be toss-up-ish.
I think SMU beats Clemson.
I do too.
I think SMU's a good football team.
The Ponies are good, man.
They can play defense. That's what I think a lot of people are missing. They didn't play great defense against TCU early in the year, but they're a solid defense.
They got some dudes on that side of the ball, no question.
They are. All right, Bill, final upset game. Kansas State at Iowa State is another Big 12 shakeup coming, Bill. Are we going to have another upset in the Big 12? And here's the other question. This is all the scenarios. I think they said something like there's like 250 different potential scenarios. You've got BYU hosting.
We're cutting a lot of them down, though, because Colorado's taking care of their business.
Right. So does K-State pull off the upset over Iowa State, which would knock them out of the Big 12 title game, most likely, or can the Cyclones pull off a heck of a bounce-back season and finish 10-2? Because I thought they were in trouble a couple weeks ago, Bill, when they had lost – they got beat by Texas Tech, and then the week later they got beat, I thought, pretty convincingly by Kansas. Looked like they were fading a little bit. They barely beat UCF. They had that wild comeback to beat UCF. So, okay, they're going to fold. And they bounced back and had 2 solid wins. Do they keep it rolling, or does K-State kind of finish strong? Because I think this is the most dangerous team in the Big 12, Kansas State.
Bad matchup.
Kansas State's on. They're very, very good.
Bad matchup for Iowa State, too, because K-State can run the ball. And Iowa State ranks 15th in the Big 12 in run defense. Bad matchup in that. Well, it really comes down to Avery Johnson, right? And simple statistic here. Statistics, the way we do them, I just try to keep them simple. Avery Johnson, they haven't won when he's thrown 2 or more picks. They haven't lost when he's thrown less than 2 picks. And he is kind of their barometer to me, right? Like a football barometer. I know you used to coach this stuff. I wonder how when you watch that in a game or you're prepping for a game and this quarterback might turn the ball over in your place, like how do you bait him into turnovers? Iowa State's pretty good on the back end. Also find it ironic that you and I about a month and a half ago were comparing. We were doing the Iowa State versus BYU beauty contest. You liked one, I liked the other, and they're probably about the same as we get into this final week. And Iowa State somehow has a little advantage, even though I think BYU would beat them head-to-head, which you liked BYU more the whole time anyway. I do like Iowa State in this game, though. I think they find a way at home. High chance for, craziness. Being at Jack Trice Stadium, all those things that happen with that. Be happy for Matt Campbell, though. And the way that this sets up, it means our Big 12 championship game, which I absolutely didn't have predicted, was Iowa State and Arizona State. And, if that happens, Brian, I'm starting to think this through. Probably right. Boise probably gets that 4 seed.
Here's where I'm going on this one, Bill. I'm going with K-State pulling off the upset, and here's why. Kansas State this year is 6-1 when they rushed for over 200 yards. The only exception being when they lost to BYU, and that was an absolutely nutty, like those games don't repeat, fumbled punts, and I mean, it just was a nutty game. And Iowa State in their last 4 games has given up, when you look at their rush defense, they shut down Utah, who's not very good rushing the football. UCF went for 354. They held Texas Tech to 129 in the rain. Kansas ran all over them, 237, and Cincinnati ran all over them, 287. You can beat Cincinnati when you give up 200 yards rushing. You're not beating Kansas State. And I think this is a DJ Giddens comes out early. The run game gets rolling early. That quiets the crowd, and that takes a lot of that pressure off of Avery Johnson because that's really big key. How do you force them into turnovers? Shut their run game down, put him in a lot of 2nd and 10s, 3rd and 9s, and that's when Avery Johnson is going to make mistakes. If they're running the football and he can play action and move the pocket and all those type of things, and he doesn't feel that pressure of I've got to go make a lot of plays, he's a lot better, and he's for a young kid. So I actually think K-State's running game is going to get going. And I think they're going to win this football game. Now, the concern is sometimes their rush defense isn't that good. And, they're going to have to watch that. And I think their pass defense also can be very vulnerable at times. And they're going to have to be really good against Rocco Becht. And I think that they will be. I'm actually going with K-State pulling off the upset. And I think what we're going to see here now from this, how this is going to end is we're going to see BYU beat Houston. And we're going to see Arizona State beat Arizona and then Colorado, and you have those 3 2-loss teams to finish. I'm not quite sure what the tiebreakers are. I know that Arizona State's in if they win. I do know that one. I don't know what happens if BYU beats Houston and Iowa State gets beat. I'm not quite sure that. You'd probably know that, Bill.
BYU and Arizona State will rematch.
That's how I see the Big 12 finishing.
And that's probably what you'll get. The Colorado's taking care of their first leg right now. They're up 45-0, which by the time I get off this podcast, I may have to warm up a Mike Gundy replacements list. That may happen.
It's been a bad year.
But I think that would be what happens in the Big 12. And K-State, I do have Iowa State winning, but not super comfortable with it. And of the 3, this is the most likely upset.
Yep, I agree. All right, let's get into the big games, Bill. As we get close to wrapping this up, and I really want to talk about these games because this South Carolina at Clemson matchup is huge. You've got Carolina's 15th, Clemson's 12th. I really felt like they positioned both of these teams to give the winner a great shot to jump into the playoff if a couple things happen. I really think that's why they positioned South Carolina. I don't think they could just go put South Carolina up ahead of Ole Miss and Alabama when both of them beat them head-to-head without this potential win being on their resume. Clemson is in a position where they haven't beaten anybody with a pulse all year. Now you've got number 15 South Carolina, who's one of the hotter teams in the country coming in, and now you have that big game. So huge matchup. Clemson has dominated this rivalry since Steve Spurrier left. They won 2 years ago in Clemson. Last year, Clemson won on the road, got their payback. Now this is another big game between these two. Red hot South Carolina against a Clemson team that honestly is not playing very good football the last month of the season. How do you see this one playing out, Bill? Obviously, Clemson, if they win, they've got a shot to one-up. They're an upset or 2 away from jumping into the college football playoff.
Yeah, flesh that scenario out, and then you look at. I got South Carolina pulling the upset here, though, so that's going to make that for not. I love the way they're running the ball. They are the consummate team that is playing great at the right time, But the problem with them getting in the playoff is they're probably landlocked by, and I know it was earlier in the season, but they did lose to Alabama, and they did lose to Ole Miss, and those are the other 3 lost teams in that conversation. So it's hard to. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bill. I'm
saying it's hard to leapfrog those teams, even if you believe in your head, hey, they're probably playing a little better than those teams are right now.
I understand where you're coming from. Here's where I would disagree with you and why I think that the way that they jumped Clemson up the way they did is because I think they want to give South Carolina a chance to jump in front of Bama and Ole Miss. Head-to-head matters. There's no doubt about that. But what this committee has said is that head-to-head is only a factor. And when you look at South Carolina's overall resume, you're going to have a team that has lost to Ole Miss, who's a top 15 team, convincingly took Alabama down to the wire in Tuscaloosa and then lost a game back in September to LSU, who's going to be 7-5 or 8-4 in a game where their quarterback got knocked out, that they can easily say if their quarterback doesn't get knocked out of that game, they beat LSU. And I think that's very true. But also the fact that they're red hot, where Alabama and Ole Miss lost that. So head-to-head, obviously, plus for Ole Miss and plus for Alabama, way better losses by South Carolina. And the committee does look at losses. They look at good losses, and they're going to have their worst loss is going to be probably to an 8-4 LSU team, because I think LSU wins this weekend. Whereas those other two teams lost to bad football teams. And if Tennessee beats Vanderbilt, like you and I talked about, Bama will have a 6-6 loss. I think that LSU beats Oklahoma this weekend, because that's who they have at home this weekend, and why I think they're going to go 8-4. I do think they're going to beat Oklahoma this weekend. So now Bama would have 2 losses to 6-6 football teams. So I think that's what's now and with South Carolina, when you look at their wins right now, they've got a win over number 24 Missouri and a win over number 20 Texas A&M. So they don't have quite enough wins to jump those teams yet. But I think beating number 12 Clemson at Clemson does give them enough to jump them over those teams. That's why I think there was intentionality behind where they put those 4 teams right in a row, right there.
Yeah. I mean, I see it, but I just think Alabama will be tough to hop in that situation. They don't deserve it, but I mean, they wear that Alabama helmet, and they did beat South Carolina, and I do think that
Ole Miss would have the better argument in the head-to-head, don't you think?
They do, but it doesn't mean they'll do that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
They'll look at that loss last week and say, hey, they turn – although Alabama's loss of the bunch is the worst one. So I think the Gamecocks win this game. I just saw a prediction on here by one of your commenters, and I'm almost identical to it. I got South Carolina winning 26-24, a little upset, and it is D-Rock 27-24. So we're right on the – I think D-Rock and I need to go out for a drink at some point.
He would probably like that.
He would probably like that. We agree. And, I'm going to go Gamecocks. It's risky at Death Valley, though. They don't lose at home often. And Clemson, Dabo could beat them. And, I mean, I'm telling you, I see it a mile away. Miami tumbles. Dabo goes in. Oh, nobody believes in little old Clemson. We're just going to go play SMU. And then they go win. And then all of a sudden they're a 4 or 3 seed. That would be hilarious. Not in a good way.
Yeah.
Don't know if I actually want to see that.
5 of the last 6 games against Power 5 teams, Clemson has held those opponents to less than 90 yards rushing. The only exception being the Louisville game, which they lost.
Right.
That's going to be the key. Can you shut down Rocket Sanders and Lenore Sellers? And can you get Phil Maffa going enough against the South Carolina run defense has also been pretty good this season. Can you do enough with that to win this game? That's to me is going to be the big key in this game. It's going to be who can run it and who can stop it. And when you look at South Carolina's rush defense, again, it's been very good this season, very good. Okay against Texas A&M early, okay against Missouri, solid against Missouri, shut down Vanderbilt for the most part, obviously blew out Wofford. That's going to be the key. Can Clemson get to over 150 yards rushing and be the first team to do that against South Carolina? If they do, I think they win. If they don't, it's going to be a lot closer game. I'm going to give the edge to Clemson. I actually picked Clemson to win 31-27. I think Clemson is going to run the ball well enough early to take some of that pressure off Cade Klubnik, and he's going to make a couple big throws. And I think if Clemson stops the run, I just don't know if Lenore Sellers is good enough to beat a good team throwing the football. That's really what it boils down to for me, Bill, is when South Carolina, and their run game has been red hot lately. But when I look at that Missouri game, they went for 286 against A&M, 214 against Vandy, whipped those teams, 265 against Wofford. They struggled to beat Missouri and only ran for 109 yards in that game. They couldn't run the ball against Alabama and had trouble winning that game because they couldn't make enough plays throwing the football. I think Clemson does enough to slow their run game down, make Lenore Sellers beat him with his arm, and I don't think he can do that. That's why I'm going with Clemson in this game. I'm going Clemson 31, South Carolina 27, and I think they get a little payback from their home loss to the Gamecock. I think that game is why you're going to see Clemson not overlook this team at all, is because of that loss. Let's get into the last one, Bill. And that is Texas at Texas A&M. This game lost a little bit of the luster because of what happened last weekend with Texas A&M getting beat by Auburn. I still can't fathom that one. Don't know what to make of this Texas A&M team, Bill. I really don't. Haven't played good football really for the last month. Texas hasn't really been challenged in a while, if we're being honest. The one big thing that makes me – there's two things about this game that make me think it can maybe be a little bit more competitive than we all think it – than maybe some people think it's going to be. Number one, I think this Texas A&M team is incredibly battle-tested. Last month, they've had to play LSU, at South Carolina, at Auburn, where Texas comes into this game. Their last several games were over a bad Kentucky team, a struggling Arkansas team in which they didn't play well, and a Florida team that was missing a bunch, and then Vanderbilt. They haven't really played anybody that's on their level since that Georgia game. Texas A&M certainly has.
Yes.
That's where I see it, Bill. How do you see this game playing out? What's your prediction for this game?
I see a little bit different in that Texas has avoided the chaos, right? They've won at Arkansas. They didn't lose. They've won at Kentucky. They maybe haven't won by 4 touchdowns. Since the bye week, Quinn Ewers, 9 touchdowns, no interceptions, has the ankle injury. Everybody's just so eager to talk about Arch Manning in the future and Ewers in the portal or Ewers in the NFL draft. They're forgetting that this team's pretty good defensively. And I was curious to hear, I put Texas defense on the level of maybe not like baby step behind Notre Dame, Ohio State.
And that's where we're at. They're the top 3. I just think there's a clear difference between them and the top 2.
Right. And I watched them just dismantle Michigan and dismantle, Oklahoma. And I get that those teams aren't great, but they step up in the big games. Arkansas's entire season was predicated on beating Texas. Just like Texas A&M's entire existence is going to be on beating Texas in this game. And
the 30 points they gave up to Georgia were also very misleading in regard to their defense. Their defense actually played well that game. Their offense is what put them in those bad spots against Georgia.
I think they're the better team. I think they're above the chaos. I'm going to love sitting down watching it. If I could pick 3 rivalry games to watch Saturday, I'm always going to pick Ohio State, Michigan. Then I'll pick USC, Notre Dame, because I always love it when they're out there for some reason. It looks cooler. And then this one, because they haven't seen each other in a while. But, I think Ewers is playing. If Ewers doesn't turn the ball over a bunch, Texas A&M's offense is going to have to – they're going to pull – it's kitchen sink for them. They'll fake a punt. They'll do things they don't normally do to try to make it close. And, I just look back at – I could see a very comparable game to week 1 when Notre Dame went in there and won because Notre Dame was just a little bit better, equipped to deal with all the noise. Now the noise, you can talk about the atmosphere and all that. It's going to be as loud. It'll probably be louder because they've been waiting 13 years for this game. Yep. And I just think Ewers gets it done. Texas, even if they play a little bit with one hand behind their back, they let their defense do the rest, come up with a couple turnovers and take the lot. That's what these rivalry games are about. There's nothing better than going into the other house and taking the other team's soul. And I think Texas might just do that, sets up a rematch with Georgia. I had it at what did I have it at? I think I had I had them barely covering, like 31-24.
Okay. I have 30-17. So, because speaking of going into somebody's house and taking their soul, Miami's just doing that to Bowling Green right now. There's a minute left, and they're up 28-12. So the Red Hawks are going to clinch a spot in the MAC championship, by the way. Just a little heads up watching that game right now.
There you go.
Bill, I love Mike Elko. I think he's going to do some great things at Texas A&M. I really do. He's going to recruit there. He's a heck of a coach. They're going to be tough. I think he made a mistake when he switched quarterbacks. And I know that Connor Wegman was struggling, but I think what he should have done is try at least to either get a 2-quarterback system going, because when you look at what's happened to Texas A&M since they benched Connor Wegman, they have not run the football very well. They went for 144 against South Carolina. Again, South Carolina has a good rush defense, 3.4 per carry. They went for 167 on 52 carries against Auburn for 3.2 per carry. They ran on New Mexico State, but New Mexico State sucks. The reason why is once Marcel Reed got put into the lineup, nobody's scared of the Texas A&M pass game anymore. Right. And they're just loading the box and saying, you're not going to be able to run the ball on us. And he cannot throw the ball well enough to beat teams. And I think this Texas secondary is a top 5 secondary. I said this before the season. People, their defense. I said, guys, all those freshmen that had to go through those struggles last year are going to be better for it this year because they're very young, but they're talented, and we're starting to see that. They're the only pass defense in the country that is like, if Notre Dame's not number one in a pass defense category, it's because Texas is. Notre Dame's number one in pass yards allowed. Texas is 2. Notre Dame is number 1 in pass D efficiency. Texas is number 2. Notre Dame is tied for 3rd in fewest touchdown passes allowed. Only teams better, Texas and Ohio State. Notre Dame is 2nd in yards per attempt, and Texas is number 1. Notre Dame is number 1 in completion percentage allowed. That's the one where actually they're ahead of Texas. Texas down to 30. But they are a very good pass defense, and they're going to be able to just go man coverage on the Texas A&M receivers and put 8 in a box and say, you're not going to run the ball on us. And Marcel Reed is not going to be good enough to make that happen. So unless he's willing to go back to Connor Wegman to try to give that offensive spark, I don't think A&M is going to be able to have enough offense to score on this defense. I love him. I understand why he did it. I just think it was a mistake to put because Marcel Reed, we've seen him before. People forget he started against Bowling Green. He started against Florida, started against Arkansas. I think he panicked a little bit. I think Connor Wegman didn't necessarily handle that game very well mentally. Maybe he had to make the decision, but they have not been the same team since they made that decision. Not even close. And I think Texas is going to win. I think Texas wants that Georgia rematch bad.
They do.
And there's a lot of hatred in this rivalry between Texas A&M. I think they're going to smack A&M pretty good. If anything, I think I might be underselling the margin. I think Texas beats them convincingly in this game. And wins this one by at least the 13 that I have.
I like Texas, and you neglected to mention that. Yeah, Miami clinched a MAC championship berth, but they're going to be playing the Ohio Bobcats, who also are clinching.
Well, that's why I brought it up because I know that matters for you. Because
that's crazy. So
yeah.
Ohio, real quick,
it's a rematch opportunity for the
rematch.
Bobcats
Miami
too.
won the first one, but Ohio has not won a MAC championship since 1968, and they are 0-5 in the MAC championship game. So it's time to go get one. For the
time to go get one.
Time to Bobbies to go get one, and we'll see if it happens next week. But no, so I mean, according to our picks, yeah, like Texas, Georgia, I might pick Texas in that rematch.
I will as well.
So
I'm picking both regular season losers next week.
I like that. I think I'm going to as well because it's that whole rematch, and then they might get a 3-match, and then who knows. But
I also think A&M is a good warm-up for this Texas offensive line getting ready for that Georgia rematch. Because that's the thing you and I talked about. We both picked Texas to win that game, but the thing we were concerned about on top of just Kirby getting that team ready was Texas hasn't really played anybody that can really play big boy football with them. And now they will, especially with this Texas A&M matchup. So that's where I'm at, Bill. So any other games besides, we talked about a lot of them, Bill, but before we go, any other games that you kind of got your eye on that, maybe a potential upset or a real intriguing game, something that, because we didn't even waste time talking about Alabama, Oklahoma last week.
Iron Bowl is always, like I said, SMU Cal could have a little interesting there. A mix, the game that could impact some things within the playoff picture. And then after that, not really. I mean, tonight we'll talk and we'll settle in, watch Georgia Tech, and keep an eye on that game. I think could go either way. Another one where you just don't know. I mean, like part of me thinks Georgia will just roll them and get ready, and they're home and it's tough to beat them at home, but Georgia's that one elite team. So I had this conversation this week. I think there are 6 teams capable of winning a national title this year. And I think those teams in any order, whatever, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Georgia, Notre Dame, and that might be it, actually. I don't know if I have a six.
I'll bet you had Bama before last week.
Bama's home run swing before last week. Those are the 5 that I think, and we've talked a lot on this one today about Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Texas because of that defense, and Georgia because of the combination of athletes and experience in those. Their home, I always call it a home run swing. Their A game is pretty darn good. Their A game is they can knock you out and win, and Kirby can say nobody believed in them, and they're good at that still. So they're the one that I could see that. Oregon too. I mean, Oregon kind of flying under the radar. Again, another team that has avoided the chaos. They've won all their games. We can't penalize you for winning all your games. We can say, hey, you have some holes.
Sure. The thing that bothers me about the not talking enough about Oregon is it's not like they've walked through a bad schedule. I mean, Boise's a good football team. They beat Boise. They beat Ohio State. They beat Illinois convincingly. They went on the road and beat Michigan, went on the road and beat Wisconsin. They've got 3 top 25 wins right now, 2 top 15 wins right now, and we act like they've got Indiana's schedule. I mean, that's kind of bothered me a little bit. They do have holes, though, but that's true for everybody. Everybody's got holes right now. There is no team without holes. If Ohio State plays a team in the playoff that's got a dynamic defensive line, they're going to have some problems. If they play a team with a lot of speed on the perimeter, as Oregon showed, they could have some problems. Notre Dame has some of those holes. Everybody's got those holes, and that's what I think is going to make a fascinating playoff, Bill. I cannot wait to see the final. So we are going to end things there. Bill, great job today. I'm very excited to sit back and watch what I hope is some great football this next couple days. And you'll be at Ohio State and Michigan, so enjoy that. Stay warm. I know
it's supposed to be cold. It's gross out. I hate cold weather. I have to get the winter coat out.
You don't have very far to drive. So
I know we're going to do this next week for conference title, and I didn't know what the plan was. Hopefully we can maybe do a couple of these leading up to the playoff matchups. And I've enjoyed it all season. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. We did too. So I'm going to go catch the family a little bit before the weekend gets going.
Thanks, Bill. Everybody hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., we'll be back for our Irish Breakdown sort of game day, 10 a.m. Eastern here at Irish Breakdown. Vince and I will be there live. We'll talk about Trevor. I didn't want to commit him to it because I hadn't brought it up to him yet. But I think the way he reacted, he'll probably be a little fired up about it. We'll try to maybe get a couple other guests on to kind of come and talk about a couple games. But 10 a.m. tomorrow, Irish Breakdown. Make sure you're subscribed to it. Make sure you got that notification bells on because we're going to go live at 10 a.m. and just sort of have a game day, preview all the national games. We'll obviously talk about Notre Dame USC because that's a big game this weekend, but it's just going to make it sort of a college football type of thing. I want to see what you guys think about that. Maybe if it goes well, we might do it again championship weekend. If it goes well, maybe, who knows? It might be something we do next year as well. So definitely check that out. So hit that like button on your way out, folks. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We would always appreciate your guys' support. And there's no better way to support us than to sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. I'm going to go finish my turkey and enjoy my Thanksgiving dinner, which we're doing a day late. But appreciate all y'all support over the last couple of weeks as well. I am incredibly moved and touched by the number of people that texted me or DM'd me or sent me emails with everything we're going through. I've never appreciated – I always appreciate this community, but I've never appreciated it more than I have the last month with the things that my wife and I are going through and my family are going through, to just see how many people reached out and just express so much concern and care. It means the world to me, and I know it means the world to Angela as well. So thank you guys so much. Have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll talk to you all again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.